Here.
Ryder?
Here.
Fisher?
Here.
Thank you, Evelyn. So we do have a quorum of planning commissioners, and we will proceed. And we will now hear public comment from members of the public for items not on the planning commission agenda tonight and within the planning commission's jurisdiction. So we will see if any of the attendees would like to take their time tonight to speak with us.
Great, thanks, Chair Alonso. We'll go ahead and open it up to public comment then. I see we have one attendee raising their hand at the moment, but I will just explain it. For those attending tonight, you'll see an option at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand. If you want to select that, I'll call on attendees in the order in which they've raised their hand. Please note that I'll ask you to state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes for each person raising their hand. And I'll also ask that you please state your name for the record. First is Paul G. I've allowed you to speak.
Good evening, planning commissioners. Thank you for the time this evening. I last spoke to you on the 26th of January, and that's when we said goodbye to the Petaluma Creamery WTF debacle for now, thankfully. We hope this project never rises from the dead. To ensure that, we will place in the public record in the next 2 weeks a full rotation of 3 written documents in the public record as the last 3 nails into this coffin. With expert analysis using professional calibrated equipment, something CTC technology did not do, we will place into the record measurements of each of the frequency channels bands that Verizon has licensed from the FCC. CTC just looked at LTE. They didn't look at the individual licenses. This work will expertly and fully rebut each of the following. Number 1, the unfounded claims made by Hammett and Edison, the professional engineer who put his stamp and staked his license on a very questionable RFEMR exposure report. 2, the inexplicably poor collection of raw signal data and of the co-opted report offered by CTC Technology, one that was blindly accepted by city staff as quality work. The CTC report is so riddled with errors in methodology and analysis that the professional engineer that authored this report, Lee Arthurbuck, was not even willing to put his PE stamp on this report. That speaks volumes. That led to a self-serving letter by Verizon outside counsel, Paul Albritton, who falsely claimed that the data collected by CTC corroborates this deceptive statement. Quote, Verizon Wired submitted evidence confirming a significant gap in service in the South Petaluma area. That is not true. He goes on, the city's independent consultant, CTC Technology and Energy, confirmed there is inadequate network capacity to properly serve customers. That is also not true. And identified a need for enhanced in-building coverage. Also not true. This statement is provably false based on an inspection of what is already in the City of Petaluma public record. That brings us to the commissioner comments from that evening. We learned a lot from those. Councilmember Fisher was actually trying to get an answer to a question. Do we have any records of what is emitting from these towers? The answer was, we don't. And therefore, you need to address that in the upcoming ordinance. Hey, you know what's going on with this ordinance is we're getting a lot of the same kind of runaround we got on the other project. We have excellent information to share with Petaluma to make sure it's a very strong ordinance. We can't get anybody to return a call. We'd like that return call. And we would like to actually show you why it's so much better to listen to the top experts in the country, not telecom law firm, in order to try to figure out the best way to protect Petaluma. There's lots of evidence and admissions by telecom law firm why they are not a good choice and deserve to be fired by the city immediately starting tomorrow. We will be putting all that evidence in the record starting tomorrow. So we are asking that we do have a nice professional dialogue. That's what everyone was talking about. We want comments to be civil and kind. We want to make sure that we can work together as a community. That's what I heard from you, commissioners. That requires a return call from.
All right, Paul, thank you. That's your 3 minutes are now up. Thank you for coming tonight and speaking with us. And we'll move on to the next public comment.
Thank you, Paul. I don't see any more public comments at this time. I'll go ahead and pass it back to Chair Alonso.
All right. Thank you, Eric. And that closes public comment tonight for items not on the agenda. If members of the public are here and they wish to comment on another agenda item that we're going to be hearing later, they can do so when that agenda item is up, and there will be time for that. So moving on, we're going to hear commission comment, and we'll start off. We're agenda item number 4, and we'll go to our council liaison, Councilmember Delinda Fisher.
Thank you. Last council meeting we had last week, we looked at the Scott Ranch, the David on draft EIR, and we did vote unanimously to move that forward to a final. And I think that's the only thing I have to report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Fisher. And Commissioner Hooper, Bicycle Pedestrian Committee.
We have not met since our last planning commission meeting. So nothing to report, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then Commissioner Marzo with the Tree Advisory Committee.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Alonso. The Tree Advisory Committee met on March 17th, and we continued our discussions regarding the tree technical manual, as well as taking it one step further for the heritage tree map. There are also plans coming together for an Arbor Day celebration in some sort. So that's kind of being worked out. Things are changing in our county, and I think everyone is just waiting to see how things come together so that we can do an Arbor Day celebration and make it safe for all the community to participate in. So that is my Tree Advisory Committee report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Marzo, for that update. And now we'll open it up to any other commissioners wanting to make comment tonight or give us any updates they have. And seeing no one else raise their hand, we'll move on to the next agenda item, number 5, which is staff update from our planning manager, Hines.
So good evening, commissioners. Nothing specific. Councilmember Fisher brought up the Scott Ranch, which was on my list. So the only other the 2 things I wanted to bring up are things at our next planning commission meeting. We will be bringing a discussion about the all-electric code that we are moving forward with. That is moving to council, scheduled right now for the first meeting in May. So I'm kind of trying to close the loop with this commission as well as the Climate Action Commission to look at that and get some feedback on a few points of that legislation before going to council. The other thing I wanted to bring up is May is Affordable Housing Month. And so at the second meeting at City Council on the 17th, we are starting to put together a housing workshop to discuss some of the things that came up during the annual progress report that was to council last month, and looking at some direction and ideas for strengthening our affordable housing program with the city. So I wanted to just get both of those on your radar. And then finally, I wanted to turn it over to City Attorney Dan Lee, who had some comments that he wished to make in response to the public comment just received.
Thank you, Heather. If I may, Chair Lon, just wanted to address a couple things in Mr. McGavin's comments. The first is regarding the analysis that CTC did and was retained to do as part of staff's review of the Verizon application. There was formerly, but there no longer is a requirement that those reports be stamped. There's no significance that the report that was submitted to the city was not stamped. It has no meaning whatsoever. It's not a requirement. Regarding the telecom law firm, there has been and continues to be a lot of erroneous information that has been disseminated by members of the public that reflect a misunderstanding of the conflicts rules that apply to attorneys in the state of California, myself, and all attorneys that are licensed to practice, and they prohibit us from representing clients with adverse interests to present or former clients. That's important information, and the effort that staff are preparing to embark upon to prepare and present to the council for consideration and to the public for consideration and comment. Updates to the telecommunication regulations of the city, we look forward to doing and anticipate there'll be healthy public discussion regarding that. We're happy to receive suggestions regarding the course of it, but we're going to, as we always do with respect to those legislative efforts, we're going to need to focus our work on that and prepare a draft for consideration in the first instance. So thank you very much. Those are my comments.
Thank you, City Attorney Danley. And then Commissioner Potter, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, just on another topic, I'm wondering if Planning Manager Hines could confirm that the third meeting of the VMT committee would be happening on March 30th.
It is scheduled for March 30th, correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, staff, for the updates. And we'll move along to agenda item number 6, which is the approval of Planning Commission meeting minutes from Tuesday, March 9th, 2021. Does anyone have any comments or suggestions or edits on those meeting minutes as submitted by staff? Okay, seeing nobody else have any comments, we will approve, and there's my cat, and we will approve the minutes as submitted, but I will be abstaining as I was not at the meeting on March 9th. And then with that, we will go to new business. We have a packed agenda tonight with 3 items. And so we'll start with 7A, which is IZO Chapter 6 Zoning Text Amendment.
Hi, Commissioners. I'm Gina Benedetti Petnick, Assistant Director of Public Works and Utilities, and I'm here to present what will be your briefest new business tonight, hopefully. And I'm here also as the city's floodplain administrator and also the CRS coordinator for the city. And this item is a zoning text amendment. We were recommending that the Planning Commission adopt, that the Planning Commission recommend to City Council. And it's a IZO text amendment to incorporate new language, modifying the freeboard requirements in the floodplain for residential construction. And the brief background on this, our Chapter 6 in the IZO, our Floodway and Floodplain District chapter, was written largely informed by the CRS program. It's managed by the National Flood Insurance Program and overseen by FEMA, and it establishes basic requirements above which communities provides for a point system and a rating system where communities can provide flood protection in their floodplain for construction to minimize risk, minimize damage, and in so doing, reduce the flood insurance costs that are charged to the residents in the floodplain. And the city's participated in this program since 2001. And very recently, in January of this year, 2021, FEMA issued an amendment to their CRS program, creating a stricter requirement for protection for equipment specifically in homes in the floodplain. And so as many of you may know, we do have what's called a freeboard requirement already for structures in the floodplain, where we require they be constructed 1 foot above the water level in the floodplain. The base elevation is what we call it in a floodplain. And freeboard is that distance between the water level and whatever it is that you're reporting. It's an old maritime expression, actually. And in this case, we've always had the protection for structures, but we never were required to, nor had a protection in there for equipment. So that could be a water heater, it could be HVAC equipment, it could be electric panels, etc. So FEMA is now asking the communities that are working within the CRS system, if we want to maintain our ratings in the CRS system, then we are required to now comply with this added requirement for freeboard protection for equipment. And our deadline to comply with this is May 27th. And so we did not have a lot of notice on this. And we're coming to you to present the zoning text amendment. It will allow us to stay in compliance with the CRS program. It will allow us to maintain our CRS rating of 6 on a scale of 1 to 10. That rating provides a 20% discount to our residents on their flood insurance. And I think that for background, I think I'll just keep it brief and leave it there. And in summary, to recommend the proposed amendments to the council, Planning Commission must find that the amendments conform to the Petaluma General Plan and are consistent with public necessity, convenience, and general welfare in accordance with the ISEO. Planning Commission has discretion to recommend modifications to the staff proposal, and if so, Commission should convey the reasons for any modifications to council. And I think I'll close at that and would be happy to answer any questions.
And can I, Chair Alonso, can I just add that you received a slightly revised resolution, or not the resolution, but the draft ordinance you received from Evelyn earlier today with a few changes to the language. Are you looking at me confused? Did you not receive?
We did.
You did. Looks like Fisher maybe did not receive it. Others did. It went out earlier. There's a few changes to language, mostly to reference manufactured home over mobile home and to reference significant rehabilitation or reconstruction. And those minor changes in language were added at the request of FEMA representation and representation from CRS, correct, Gina, when we sent them the draft to gain their feedback. Those are the changes that they recommended. So our recommendation would be that when you adopt a resolution recommending council approval, that it be with the revised ordinance that was presented.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you very much for that additional info, and thank you for the staff report. We'll open up to public comment right now on this agenda item, and then we'll bring it back to the commission. So if any members of the public wish to comment, Mr. Roberts can help facilitate that.
Thanks, Chair Alonso. I don't see any hands raised at the moment, but I'll just provide a few moments if any attendees want to raise their hands. Once again, that's simply a button at the bottom of your screen. If anyone's just joining us now, where you can select the raise your hand option, and I'll be able to call on our attendees in order.
Okay, seeing nobody come forward and raise their hands, we will close public comment on this agenda item and then bring it back to commission for any comments or questions. If anyone has any questions for staff, we can take those now. Okay, or we can entertain a motion. If someone wants to make a motion, that'd be great. Commissioner Hooper.
I would like to move that we adopt the recommended amendments.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Marzo makes the second. Thank you. So any further discussion on the motion Seeing no further discussion, we'll go to a roll call vote, please.
Okay, Bauer, Alonso,
Yes.
Hooper,
Yes.
Marzo,
Yes.
Potter,
Aye.
Ryder,
Yes.
and Fisher.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Evelyn. The motion passes 6-0, and that is the end of that agenda item. Thank you, staff, for the presentation. And we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is 7B, which is the Doherty Residence Site Plan and Architectural Review for a new single-family house on a vacant 0.95 acre lot. And we will hear from staff. And then Commissioner Potter is going to need to recuse. Commissioner, if you could just state the reason for the record.
I was informed by staff that I own property within 1,000 feet of the proposed project. And so to avoid any appearance of conflict, I'm going to be recusing myself on this item.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will move forward on this item with 5 members of the commission, and we will hear from staff.
Thank you. I just need to get my screen sharing in order. I'm sorry. It's here. It's just so big. And now I'm locked in.
Tiffany, does Eric have a backup that he can pull up for you?
No, and I'm so sorry. Now I'm not even sure what, I've lost everything else seems to be the problem.
Should we try to see if the applicant wants to present first then?
Wow. Okay.
Just while you look for it.
I know. I'm sorry. It's like, it must be obvious, but I'm not.
You do have to have it open.
I have it open. I've lost my, really everything else. Let's.
Chair, I think it's going to be important to hear the staff report at the beginning of the discussion of this item. So I don't know if we can come up with a way to maybe send that.
Yeah. If you can send it, Tiffany, to either myself or Eric, we can pull it up for you.
So why don't do you want to take a 5-minute just brief recess while we
I
get?
would love that. I
Oh, that'd be great.
apologize.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Thank you, Chair
We'll just
Alonso.
take a 5-minute recess, and we'll come back at 7:30.
Thanks very much.
Hey, Tiffany?
It's the problem's my VPN that I'm running the 2 different systems, and
Oh, yeah.
that's where
Yeah.
I got thrown off.
Sorry. Let me know if I can be of any help. I'm hovering in the background.
Oh, thank you.
I'm stalking.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Tiffany. It's difficult to run the VPN
I
and
thought
the
I
Zoom.
had it all figured out, but then it just took over my VPN and I got lost.
So do you have like 2 screens open?
Yes, I think I have a workaround.
Tiffany, so are you able to email it, Tiffany?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
And Tiffany, if you're emailing it, and if it's in a large size, it may not come through on the city email. So you may want to send it to either myself or Eric on the M group email, which will allow larger files.
Right. And it's on the S drive, Eric. How hard is that for you to pull up?
Not hard at all. I have the VPN. Where is it?
It is Major Projects, Woodridge. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm pulling that up now. Major Projects, Woodridge. Do you mean the Doherty?
It's in PC hearing packets. Yeah, it's Doherty 2021 PC presentations.
I'm not seeing it. So it's under Planning Major Projects, Doherty.
Woodridge.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
And it looks like Planning Commission hearing packet. And then Doherty.
Perfect. Let me see if I can get this to work. Okay, we have it up here.
Great. So are you able to share it?
Yeah.
Perfect. Teamwork.
There we go.
Crisis averted. Great.
And you can get it slideshow. There we go.
Yep.
Excellent. Good
Okay.
evening, Planning Commissioners.
I
I'm
think
Tiffany
we need-
Robb.
I think we need to wait till they
Oh.
rejoin.
Yeah, we've lost some people. Good.
So we have a minute, and then Alonzo will call it back to order.
Okay.
All right, looks like we got the staff report ready. And do we have everyone back? It's hard to see when the,
Yeah, I think we're waiting for, oh, there's Commissioner Hooper.
okay,
I believe all the commissioners are back.
okay, great. Thank you, Tiffany. We'll resume agenda item 7B.
Excellent. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. I'm Tiffany Robb, Senior Planner for the City of Petaluma. The project before you tonight is site plan and architectural review of the Doherty House at 21 Branching Way. Next. Details on the project background and project analysis were well covered by the staff report and its attachments. This staff presentation aims to serve as a brief outline of that staff report to set the stage for your hearing tonight. Next slide, thanks. As a quick reminder, in 2005, the City Council approved the Woodridge project that resulted in 4 vacant lots and 1 developed lot facing 6th Street. That's the area outlined here in red. A decade later, the 4 vacant lots were purchased by 2 families interested in consolidating them into 2 lots. In 2019, the Planning Commission approved modification to the Woodridge PUD development standards and map to accommodate consolidation of the existing 4 vacant lots into 2 lots with the split driveway access and associated setback modification, and also approved site plan and architectural review for the Nelson residence on proposed lot 1. The Planning Commission's approval was subsequently appealed, and in June of 2019, the City Council denied the appeal and upheld the Planning Commission's approval of both the PUD modification and SPAR for development of lot 1. The 2-lot map has not been recorded, or the PUD modifications vested because of pending litigation. The Doherty house is now proposed on the nearly 1 acre lot 2. The slide before, Eric, it's the light gray with the blue outline. And then the next slide, the site access is via a driveway that will connect from Branching Way over 22 Branching Way. And that was approved as part of 2019 approvals. Next. The project proposes construction of a 2-story house with an accessory dwelling unit, a pool, and open-sided pool structure and landscaping. The staff report really details those materials and the project setting. Next slide. The proposed house is 34 feet or more to each property line and over 100 feet to the nearest abutting house. Next. The proposal includes an accessory dwelling unit over the attached 3-car garage, which you can see there, as well as an open-sided pool structure, which you can see just below the garage in this image, as well as a pool. And next slide. The proposed house was reviewed for compliance with the Woodridge PUD development standards as modified by the Planning Commission and City Council decisions in 2019 to relate to the consolidated 2 vacant lot proposal. The PUD regulates parameters such as building height, building envelope, parking, lot coverage, quality design, and floor site architecture. This staff report summarizes the project's compliance with applicable development standards. Next slide. All points of the Doherty house sit under the 30-foot hillside height limit. The main ridge line, which you see here, is about 3 feet below the 30-foot line. The downhill end of the living room dormer is the tallest point of the house, and it just approaches the 30-foot line above natural grade, as this height cross-section depicts. And then I also added the front view where you can see that living room dormer, which has the one point that approaches the 30-foot line. Next. The Woodridge PUD development standards also require that visual analysis be prepared for the new house, illustrating visibility of the proposed structures from primary public viewpoints on Olive Street, Branching Way, 6th Street, and Raymond Heights. The analysis, which you see in the staff report and the attachments, found that the house will be visible from 6th Street at its intersection with Branching Way and is most visible from Branching Way itself, as shown in these images respectively, and more thoroughly discussed. Next. The Woodridge Development Standards direct site plan and architectural review to evaluate the sensitivity of the development, including as it relates to avoidance of view obstructions to neighboring properties on Olive Street, Raymond Heights, 6th Street, and Branching Way. Next. As the staff report discusses, the house was designed with an aim of avoiding view obstructions by siting the house more than 100 feet from all abutting homes, by preserving existing vegetation and adding new plantings where vegetation gaps exist, by siting the house downhill from the highest area of the building envelope, and by stepping the house down the hill so that the house was a 1-story mass on the uphill side. The Doherty house is also offset from the Tomrose house, which is most directly above the proposed house. And as this image shows, rather than being sited directly below it, avoidance of view obstruction is provided by way of a 102-foot wide gap between the approved Nelson house and the proposed Doherty house. Next. efforts to reduce view obstruction were also made through the design of the home, including insetting the wall of the house nearest the Tom Rose house above. That's the master bedroom wall. You can see it here with a green arrow. And by creating a separate roof for that portion, which is set 5 feet lower and results in the roof peak being 5 feet lower than the main roof peak and opening up further views of further city views for the house above. This image right here, the view is taken from below the Tom Rose pool, whereas the Tom Rose deck is another 6 feet higher and further to the left of this image perspective. Next slide. All required SPARC findings can be made for the proposed house, as the staff report outlines. The committee's purview tonight is site plan and architectural review. Next slide. On January 20th of this year, the applicant held a neighborhood meeting by Zoom to present the proposed project to interested neighbors. Approximately 20 people attended, and the primary concern faced by neighbors related to existing water in the hillside and the proposed drainage approach. The staff report details that and discusses the approach. 3 public comments have been received from neighbors. The first was included as an attachment in your staff report, expressed an opposition to the installation of a pool, citing drought concerns. Staff does note that if the city council should, in the coming months, adopt a resolution directing that new pools not be filled during drought conditions, as the council did in 2015, such a requirement would apply to this proposed pool. The second 2 public comments were received today. The first requested that the new landscape trees at expected mature height would not rise higher than the proposed residence and further obstruct their existing views of the city. As the staff report mentions, this was specifically the intent of the proposed landscape plan, that the uphill planting of the Swan Hill olive and crepe myrtle trees that reach 25 feet and 18 feet respectively at maturity, they were chosen specifically for this purpose. The landscape architect is here tonight and can speak more directly to this situation if you'd like. The most recently received public comment contends that no decision should occur regarding the Doherty Spar tonight due to pending litigation. As the staff report discusses, the litigation related to the 2019 Woodridge approvals does not allow construction to occur while the litigation is pending, but it does not stop SPAR review from occurring. The city attorney will speak in more detail on this topic after I finish. Next. It is recommended that the Planning Commission consider the sensitivity of the development and adopt a resolution approving site plan and architectural review for the 21 Branching Way house. Next. One more. Yes, thank you. And staff will now turn the presentation first to Eric Danley and then over to the applicant's team for their 10-minute presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, and commissioners. I just wanted to respond to a few of the issues raised in correspondence we received from the Foreman and Brasso firm today that represents the Tom Roses in the litigation. And I'll just go through those in sequence and try to be brief, but I'll be happy to answer any questions. So one of the first things that the letter raises is the fact that the 2007 PUD that merged the parcels, I'm sorry, the PD that merged the parcels has not been recorded, and that's true. However, what's important for the commission to know is that condition 3 of the planning recommended conditions to the SPAR reso in the package tonight. Conditions the approval, the SPAR approval on recordation of the merger map. So if the commission does approve SPAR tonight, that approval will not take effect without the merger. So the Planning Commission's consideration is conditioned on and based on, as it should be, the latest map action, which was to actually approve that map, even though it's not been recorded yet. So that's important for the commission to be aware of. Then there's a lot of discussion in the correspondence that seems to suggest somehow under the law that the Doherty application, which is before the commission, and the Nelson project, which is not, should be submitted and considered together. That staff has no choice as to when single family residence applicants submit their applications. It's the applicant that's in control of that. And in fact, the city and the staff have a duty to process those applications when we receive them. So the CEQA addressed as it should the map as is described accurately in the staff report before the commission tonight. The single family residences are subject to CEQA exemption, as the staff report also notes. So there's no conspiracy and nothing nefarious, and nothing over which the city has a choice. It has a duty to expeditiously process the applications that come before it when they come before it. So the other important issue is that there are orders that have been issued in the litigation, preliminary injunctions that the court has issued, but they relate to the 111 Olive Street property, not to the 21 Branching Way property that's before the commission tonight. And they also relate to site work that that may relate to the Branching Way property, but all this before the commission tonight is the SPAR, and building permits are not, they're subsection. So we've looked as closely as we can at the court's order, and it doesn't have any applicability to the action before the commission tonight. There's also discussion in the submission about a quiet title action that's been brought by the Tom Roses related to easements that allegedly are impacted by the project. City's not a party to that action. It's not subject to any orders in that action. That action does not excuse our duty that I previously mentioned to process the Doherty application that's before the commission tonight. So hence it's being brought before the commission. So I think that covers the substance. I mean, there's a lot of surmises about staff making strategic choices but as I mentioned, when staff processes the applications is determined by when the applications are submitted. So that I think covers the substance of that correspondence as it relates to tonight's action. We do not see anything in that correspondence or in the current court orders or the litigation as preventing or even excusing the commission from taking up this application. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Danley, and we'll move to the presentation from the applicant team for 10 minutes.
James or Scott, are you there to give an applicant presentation?
Was gonna start. I see him.
There's James.
Okay.
I think Tyler's floating around somewhere, having trouble being admitted, but he's able to watch. So I wanted to start for a couple of minutes to go over just the general civil engineering program. That way I can leave the majority of time for Scott Landry. I don't know. I can speak generally about the grading strategy. If the Planning Commission has access to the plan, the site plan that's in the package, then I can just speak to the strategy, or I can try to use visual aids if that's helpful. Is there a preference either way?
No
think-
preference. Just do what you feel is best.
Yeah,
Okay,
commission
so-
has the plan set for to refer to if you don't have something to pull up on the screen.
Okay, so I'll just speak generally. The Woodridge subdivision project it has not yet installed, but at some point will install drainage infrastructure that drains these two lots. The lot we're looking at tonight, and also the neighboring property, through an oversized storm drain pipe. It's just the mechanism in this situation that we are using for detention. And that system drains out to 6th Street. And this project is designed generally with surface drainage around the house. There are the retaining walls on the uphill side of the property. Those retaining walls will have back drains that are near the bottom of the footing of the wall. Those are for the purpose of reducing hydrostatic pressure on the wall. They will provide some catchment of subsurface water migrating down the hillside. There will be similar drainage components for the foundation of the building. For this project, all the drainage in these pipe systems will go into a bioretention facility prior to entering the drainage system built by the subdivision, which includes the detention component. That bioretention is part of our BASMA compliance. BASMA is the Bay Area Stormwater Management Agencies Association. Santa Rosa has LID. Probably everyone's familiar with BASMA and LID. So that component of the project will be dialed in a little bit further through the building permit process. But on the site plan, you'll see the planned bioretention is in the northwest corner. That's where the subdivision drainage system is stubbed out to the property. And there's the access coming from Branching Way will be extended up to the new house. The hammerhead, which provides fire turnaround ability, is part of the Woodridge subdivision approval for the purpose of getting access to make that lot functional. And that's all. Thank you.
Scott or Tyler, is there anything you want to add to the applicant presentation?
Yeah, I will go here. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. We cannot see you.
Oh, interesting. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
All right. Well, that'll do. Hi, I'm Scott Landry, Studio 101 Designs. Thank you, Tiffany, for your very complete staff report and presentation. So I'll try to zoom through this a little bit, but I wanted to first walk through our plans to show the proposed house's location, the size and massing. Then I'll discuss the proposed color and materials with some imagery to give a sense of how it will look in context with the neighborhood. And finally, I'll touch on some of the green or sustainable features that are proposed as part of the project. Starting with the site plan here. The proposed house is fairly linear in nature, situated to work with the topography of the site and within the prescribed setbacks, 50 feet from the north and east property lines and 30 from the west and south. The garage is located on the east side of the home, with driveway access from branching as discussed. level is 2,774 square feet, while the lower level basement area is 1,960 square feet. The attached garage is 907 square feet, with the accessory structure above within its roof form that is 625 square feet. To the north of the garage, right in here, we have a covered outdoor kitchen area that is roughly 235 square feet covered. To give a bit of context, that's 20 branching to the north, the proposed Nelson residence here, and 121 Olive to the southwest. Not shown is 22 branching to the east. Moving to the enlarged site plan, this gives you a sense of some of the finished floor and roof heights as they relate to the existing and proposed topography. In order to nestle the house in a bit more into the hillside, we're proposing a couple retaining walls. Terrace, they're both about 3 feet tall, so minimal retaining walls to allow for entry into the house on the south side of the residence. Garage slab height is 72.5 elevation, and the main floor is 75. The basement that spills out to the north and is stepped out to the north is at an elevation of finished slab elevation of 65. Highlighting a couple of the roof elevations, the main ridge line is at an elevation of 98. Stepping down towards the west is the master bedroom wing, the ridge of which is 92.5. We have a dormer on the north side of the residence over the great room, the ridge of which is 97.5, just under the main ridge. And the ridge above the roof peak above the ADU is 93.75. Next are the exterior elevations of the house. I'll touch on the specific colors and materials in a bit, but this gives you a sense of the basic styling, contemporary farmhouse, agrarian, and massing, albeit fairly flat as elevations. The house reads as a single story, as mentioned, from the on the south side, opening up down the hill to 2 stories on the north. And some, again, just elevations of the outdoor kitchen, treated consistently with the residence and material and massing. Moving to the sections which you saw up above here is cut through the entry dormer, the dormer off the living room, and through the beach, just under the 30-foot maximum height limit. Another section through the ADU on top of the garage below. And down below here, a section through the master bedroom wing, the ridge of which is well below the 30-foot max height limit. A contextual hillside elevation as well. You see the proposed Nelson residence to the right here, up above on the hillside, the Tom Rose residence, and 20 branching in front. Now look at the proposed colors and materials of the house. All the exterior materials specified are meant to be durable, long-lasting, and low maintenance. We're proposing standing seam metal roofing on all visible roof portions, color to be slate gray. Main siding is fiber cement by James Hardy, a mix of 2 details. We have horizontal tongue and groove, fiber cement boards below here, board and batten detailing above that, also in fiber cement. All of the fiber cement siding is meant to be Sherwin-Williams Gray Harbor, which you'll see on the next slide. We have accent siding, and for all the site retaining walls to be a veneer stacked stone by El Dorado called Silver Lining, and minor exterior decking elements in Ipe, along with some deck skirting in Ipe.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but we've gone about just at 10 minutes. So do you folks have any other comments you'd like to make at this time? And then we can certainly ask questions as we progress through the agenda.
I'll just, we can respond to comments. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. We just have a lot tonight, so
I'm sure. Yeah, sorry about that.
Motion, but thank you for the presentation, and we'll move to public comment now after the applicants have presented, and we'll get that going.
Sure.
Thanks, Chair Alonso. Right now, we just have one attendee with their hands up, but just in case anyone else, once again, just raise your hand at the bottom of the screen. I'll also ask Scott to stop sharing the screen so we can share our timer here.
Sorry about that. There we go.
No problem. Okay, UCC Petaluma host, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself and please state your name for the record.
This is Jason Hubbard at 143 Olive Street. Share a property boundary borders with both the Tom Rose and the proposed residents here. We shared one of the requests that the SPARS review take a careful look at the expected mature trees relative to total elevation to the residents. And I noted on the slide that was shared of sheet A102 by the previous presentation that those plantings seem to be different than what we're reading on the landscaping plan that was shared with us. So wondering which one is correct. And also noted that on the northwest corner of the home, I believe near the master bedroom, as was mentioned, it appeared on the plan that we saw that there was the intention of planting a live oak with a fully developed mature elevation between 10 and 20 meters, which would grow well above the proposed building height. We are very supportive of this home coming into the neighborhood, but concerned that there seems to be some unclarity regarding the total mature height of trees that are proposed in the plan that would exceed the height of the residents, and that's further obstruct the views we enjoy as being their direct neighbor above. So just hoping for some additional clarity and possible review to make sure we're aware of what the intended tree plantings are likely to be that would involve our view above. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Up next is Ronald Foreman. Ronald, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself, and I'll ask that you will please state your name for the record.
Good evening. I don't know if you folks can see me or just hear me. I am Ronald Foreman. I am the attorney for the Tom Roses, and we have submitted today a 12-page letter along with exhibits that council made reference to, but in my view did not rebut what was said in the letter. We're asking that the site plan and the architectural review resolution be tabled, not approved or withdrawn for the reasons that are set forth in our correspondence today and what I'm going to present to you now. First of all, while counsel for the city talks about the duty to process, there's also a duty to disclose. And what we bring forward is that the planning department knew that the Doherty and the Nelson projects were going forward, that they were going forward in this PUD, and the CEQA laws prohibit piecemealing or segmenting presentation, and that's what's happened in the situation where the Nelson project was brought forward first, then the Doherty project was brought forward. The Doherty is piggybacked on Nelson. We know that because in the proposed resolution that's before you, the Nelson project is mentioned at least a half a dozen times. So the fact that there is pending litigation, I think, impacts on what's going on before you today, particularly with the comments in the preliminary injunction that were issued by the Sonoma Superior Court. That's on page 4 of our letter. And in that last paragraph, in the bold language, what the court found said was that notwithstanding the Nelson's arguments, the court finds that based on the allegations in the verified petition, as supplemented by the evidence arguments supporting the request for the preliminary injunction, there's a sufficient probability of success on the merits to justify a preliminary injunction when viewed in connection with the high risk of interim harm. Most importantly, the court went on to say, among the most compelling facts is that the subject property preserves the 30-foot setback in the original 2005-2007 PUD, but more than doubles the square footage permissible under the original 2005-2007 PUD. What staff has done is said, oh, these are going to be 2 homes. Well, it's 4 units. It's at least 2 auxiliary buildings. It's attached to a garage. The mass of this project is as though it was the 2 smaller units. There are so many points which are set forth in my letter, and I say I've got 30 seconds, that I'm going to need someone to either yield time or ask that this council go through or the commission go through the letters, because there are point by point we explain why this resolution is faulty, why the resolution can't be granted. For example, site, the quiet title is there's an easement running through Doherty and the Nelson property, and that the commission should be informed by staff, and staff has an obligation to find easements. They didn't do that. They failed in their obligations to you. If I can ask for leave to address a few more moments, I'd like to address the staff report in a little more detail. Would you be willing to yield me the 3 minutes, please?
No, you'd have to have someone who is attending yield time to you. If no one is willing to do that, we will move on to somebody else who wants to speak.
All right, moving on, we have Renee up next. Renee, I've allowed you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself, and I'll ask you please state your name for the record.
Hi, good evening. My name is Renee Tomrose, and I yield my 3 minutes to Ron Foreman.
Okay, so Mr. Foreman, you'll have an additional 3 minutes.
Ron, you need to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. So the grant of easement came from the Woods, the folks that started the Woodridge PUD, and that easement is smack in the middle of Nelson and extends into the Doherty property. The other issues that we raise that are problems with the staff report are plentiful, including the staff comments that in the event that the court concludes, as it did in the preliminary injunction, that the Nelson project was, that the city council used discretion in granting that, then this whole matter collapses, and for that reason, it would be a great waste of the city's resources to have this matter proceed, have it resolved, have us appeal, and then wind it back in the court. So I think this matter should be tabled for that reason. With respect to the PUD, everybody starts talking about, oh, we have the 2019. Well, neither the 2017 nor the 2019 tentative maps are recorded. The controlling PUD is the 2007, not an unrecorded 2017, nor an unrecorded 2019. The road for the fire department off of Branching Lake is as narrow as 12.5 feet. Typically it's 20 feet is what the fire code represents, and that needs to be looked at. There are issues with respect to how staff presents the house, saying, oh, looks like a one-story unit from the uphill side. That's not the issue. What is the mass of this house? We heard the square footage. It allows for at least either a junior auxiliary unit to be built, if not just an ADU, on top of the garage. When the staff tries to compare this particular project of combining either Nelson or Doherty, they can't tell you what the impact is because they've never calculated for you how much grading and how much excavation would be done in the 2007 PUD in order to contrast it to what they claim is going to be less impact now. And you need those metrics in order to make the calculation. There is also issues with respect to the height, as we've alleged multiple times now, that the height of the houses exceed sea level because grading has not been properly defined, and the diagram that's being used is not the proper diagram for how the hillside home should be constructed. There's also other CEQA violations with respect to the staff report because they can't do the proper comparison that's required. And on that basis, which is the court's findings, the complaints raised in the letter today, and the fact that they've not been rebutted, I ask that the resolution be tabled or not passed at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. I don't see any other hands raised for public comment at this time, so I'll pass it back to Chair Alonso.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. We will close public comment on this our application at 21 Branching Way, and we will then bring it back to the commission for questions and comments. But before we do that, I do want to ask that any commissioners disclose any ex parte communications they've had on this project. So if you could do so now, Councilmember Fisher.
I've not had any communication. I did meet with the Tom Roses ages ago, before we heard this before council in 2019. I have a question that it's somebody just raised from the audience about the oak tree. I was just looking at the landscape plan, and it does appear that there is an oak planned, an oak being planned, a live oak, a coastal oak, on the corner of the property, and I'm wondering if staff can address that.
The landscape architect speak to that more directly. It's the oak most on the right, the left-hand side of the plan, which is to the west. Is that the one that you think he was speaking about?
Closest to the master bedroom.
Right. Yes. That is, so we can ask the landscape architect to think more or to speak to the height of that tree at maturity and the distance that it is planted down the hill.
Good evening, Don McNair from McNair Landscape Architecture. Thank you for all of your efforts on the board. It was always appreciated. It is an oak, and you know, the necessity of building these sites encompasses removing oaks that are there in order to be able to build some of these homes. So as part of our mitigation, you know, for removing these oaks, we're pretty much required to put oaks back in, and hence the reason for placing oaks. There's just opposite that singular Quercus agrifolia, California live oak, on the Nelson property, there are two oaks there to form a kind of a natural grove. There is an existing oak on the Nelson property, just mid-slope below the Tom Rose's home. It's small now, but it, you know, eventually probably will get quite large. I think the time frame for these trees to get quite large is a very long time, perhaps even hundreds of years, to achieve kind of the size that we're talking about for a mature oak tree. You know, if they're given water and they've got good drainage and good fertility, you know, they can grow fairly quickly, you know, and I think that's a good thing. But their nature is to grow pretty much vase-like for a long period, and then slowly but surely start spreading out as they mature. So, you know, in my opinion, that is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 years away when that would be causing any sort of problem. Though I have to add that we can certainly switch those trees out to something else if that is the desire of the Planning Commission. There's no, you know, I mean, we wanted to meet the mitigation that is required. but I think we can certainly move things around a little bit if need be.
So you can go ahead and mitigate your removal of oaks while keeping the trees that you're planting adjacent to the neighbors to a lower height so as not to impede their views.
Correct.
Is that
correct? You know, there are a lot of fairly dense trees at the top of the slope now that I have to point out. I mean, it's a fairly dense. If you visit Google Earth, you can see exactly what I mean as to the kind of the density of the existing screen that's there now. And they're oak trees, you know, a lot of oaks in there. So we're not really doing something that's foreign to the site. You know, it kind of gets down to the placement of the tree that's best for everybody involved.
Great, thank you. And if I can, I have a question of our city attorney, actually, Eric. So looking at SB 330, which is the Housing Crisis Act of 2019, how is it that that wasn't part of our decision making in 2019 to go ahead and consolidate these lots from 4 to 2? I don't even recall it being in the staff report at that time. Was it considered?
I don't remember any discussion about that, Councilmember Fisher. And I'm trying to think if that's even an issue for us in terms of, you know, the even with the housing production streamlining bills and downzoning, you know, legislation, et cetera, much of the development process in California is still application driven. So I don't know if staff have anything to add. I don't remember that being a discussion. I don't think it's an issue, and I don't think it's a SPAR issue before the commission in terms of the SPAR findings and
yeah,
yeah.
Caught me by surprise.
So we can look at that and, you know, in terms of, you know, if there's a shortcoming in terms of how staff presented that, you know, we're certainly accountable for that and can address it, but I don't know that it is.
So it would be allowed under SB 330?
I'm sorry, the prior
was allowed under SB 330 to consolidate these lots and remove 2 houses?
Well, there's no removal of houses. It's just division of land. Changing.
Yeah.
It's changing the division of land.
And potential of 2 more houses, right?
Yes. Well, I don't know. It's actually more complicated than that because of the ADUs that are permitted. But I as we're speaking here today, I'm not aware that was a problem in terms of the past action. I'm happy to look at that and respond. I don't think that's an issue for the Planning Commission's decision tonight.
My add to that, I don't recall SB 330 coming up as part of that discussion at that time. Obviously, you know, things have become more and more discussed and aware and keeping up on the state legislation. But I don't remember, I don't know. I don't think we ever looked at it specifically through that lens when that approval happened.
I think it's a good idea, but that's the last of my question. Thank you.
To add to that further, SB 330 took effect January 2020.
Thank you, Tiffany. So then it would not have been likely part of our discussion if it was effective in 2020.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Fisher. Does anyone else have any ex parte communications to disclose? Okay, seeing nobody else, we'll go to any other questions or comments. I see Commissioner Ryder had her hand up. Commissioner, you're on mute.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. I have actually a series of questions mostly related to green building, and I know that the applicant was unable to get to that portion of their presentation, so give them an opportunity to speak to it briefly now. In particular, I wanted to start with better understanding. There's a comment in the green building list of potential measures as proposed by the applicant that the project will use all electric heating and cooling. And I'm wondering about where else either electricity is used, or more specifically, where natural gas is used for other on-site uses.
I'll address that. So yes, we propose to use electric heating and cooling, as you mentioned. In addition, domestic hot water demands will be met via heat pump water heaters. So the majority of our electrical needs will be, or the house's energy needs will be via electricity. We're still proposing just a small or a gas line for the range or the cooktop, and for barbecue usage at the outdoor kitchen. We intend to offset the electricity needs via, what we calculate as meeting the demands at about 7 kilowatt photovoltaic array to be placed on the south-facing roof. And the intention is to meet all the electricity demands via that system.
And thank you. A point of clarification, does that mean the pool will solely be heated through the solar thermal panels, or do you have an auxiliary system there as well?
Solar thermal heating for the pool, and we are actually looking into heat pump electric hot water heater if a hot tub is, going to be a part of that pool, because the solar thermal can only get it so hot.
Okay, so at this time, though, there will be a gas line that goes to the house in the current design.
Yeah, that's a proposal.
Okay. I have follow-up questions. Is it appropriate to just continue, or should I let others talk?
No, you have the floor, so please continue.
All right, great. Thank you. So I'm a little concerned about overall space. I know it is a rather large roof, but your intention is to provide all of your electric services through photovoltaics and have a roof-mounted solar thermal system. So have you evaluated the availability of the overall roof space in order to utilize that, or are you expecting a ground-mounted system for that?
No, all roof-mounted, actually. We do have plenty. We can fit 20 on the main south-facing roof, 20 345 watt panels, making up the 7 kilowatt system for electricity. Photovoltaic can be sized accordingly on the solar thermal can be sized on the master bedroom wing. So yes, we have, and there seems to be enough room.
Great. Thank you. And then moving to a slightly different topic, as a result of not using all electric for all end uses, that puts you into a tier 2 requirement under Cal Green. And one of those requirements relates to the permeable paving on the site, utilized for all parking walkways and patio surfaces, that at least 30% of those will need to be permeable. Can you speak to how that obligation will be met?
Via permeable pavers if needed. And again, we'll weigh what's, Cal Green there's a lot of things we'll have to do, but we'll weigh that versus the need for small gas requirements as it relates to just the range and barbecue. So if we go down that path, it'll be via permeable pavers.
Okay, yeah, understood that. Yeah, you have the option to go back and adjust things later.
Sure.
Just thought I'd ask, since there's just so much of that opportunity here around the pool and so forth.
Yeah.
And then my last question for right now is related to stormwater, and it seems that you're meeting your stormwater through primarily the bioretention area. Can you speak to the total retention time as designed for that area? How long will it be expected to hold the water that captures?
James will.
Yeah, so the BASMA requirements are not, we are not required to infiltrate to satisfy BASMA as a single family home project. In this particular instance, our geotechnical engineer is not fully on board with that strategy either in a hillside setting. So what we're planning to do is we will likely have the bottom of the bioretention will be lined with something impermeable. At the bottom of that bioretention, we'll have a perforated pipe. So what we'll end up having is we'll have detention. I'm not expecting much retention. So the way it will work is the perforated pipe won't be sized to just immediately convey the peak flow going into it. So the bioretention will fill up, the perforated pipe will be activated, we'll get some detention, we'll transform that peak flow into we'll flatten the curve of that peak flow. And then that water will run through the subdivision system into the oversized storm drain pipe that is further down the hill closer to 6th Street. And we'll get some secondary detention there. So we're kind of daisy chaining because the subdivision is required to ensure that post-development flows are equal to pre-development flows. And with the individual development of this lot, BASMA will kick in as a building permit requirement. So we will kind of layer more detention on top of what's coming with the subdivision. Does that help?
It does, yes. And just so you're aware, it will also be further triggered into the Cal Green as you get further into design. So fantastic. Thank you for your answers.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Ryder, and Commissioner Hooper is up next.
I just have two questions, really. One with regards to fire prevention. I've seen in the report that was provided that you're working to have kind of the rooftop fire extinguishers, and you've also done the work to check with regards to how access and entry works and having a private hydrant. But looking at the kind of landscaping design and then looking at the surrounding homes and kind of the layout of the trees, I'm just wondering, have you worked out a plan for defensible space, and whether their home hardening tactics have you employed with the house design? Thank you. This would be either for the applicant or I'm thinking specifically perhaps the Don McNair for the landscaping plan.
I am here. I was going to let Scott go with that question first. We've kept trees somewhat away from the house. There's a conundrum going on here because we need the screening. We need to, make sure the house is adequate in that sense. And so, we're providing trees and the trees the predominant tree in the project is an olive. It's a fruitless olive. And I don't believe that is considered a hazardous tree in terms of fire. It's not like a pine or something like a juniper or something like that. But I will definitely look into that further as we move closer to this. Deal here is avoid laddering a fuel from underneath to the trees. So, and if you look at the landscape plan closely, at least on the uphill side, really I've kept just a ground cover underneath those olives that are along that section. So it is there and it is recognized, and we will work through that as we move ahead on this.
Thank you, especially because just looking at that plan, seeing how so much of the potential fuels outlined around the home. And while I do see your point about not seeing the stacking, I am worried about kind of ember to ember flow to rooftops, and then taking into account the trees and the property lines that, you know, if you don't have control over. So thank you for taking that into consideration.
Yes, no worries.
As far as the house goes, there's a level of fire-resistant materials throughout. Very resilient fiber cement board, stone, veneer, metal siding, or excuse me, standing seam metal roofing. And then as required by the fire department, access paths, stepped access paths around so they can fight the fires around the house. You'll see those off the turnaround and on the side of the house.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else have any questions or comments at this time? Commissioner Marzo.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Alonso. First of all, no ex parte communications. I apologize for my background halo. My previous questions regarding legal aspects were addressed. I had a couple of questions regarding the drainage issues, and as were asked by some of the public comments and participants, I guess my main question is, currently on 6th Street, are there any situations that currently exist that would that need to be mitigated with the addition of these two new homes? Is there I know how in the plans everything goes to 6th Street, so I guess my question is, are we okay on 6th Street? So that perhaps for someone from either staff or the applicants, please.
I'm wondering if either Gina or Jeff from Public Works wants to respond.
Hi, this is Gina. Can you repeat that?
So my question was, everything is flowing onto 6th Street. Is the city confident that the current conditions at 6th Street, as it relates to storm and drainage, can handle these additional homes? Are there any existing issues, I guess, is the first thing on 6th Street, to your knowledge?
I am not aware of any, Commissioner Marzo.
And Commissioner Marzo, I believe we looked at that as part of the environmental document that was done with the PUD amendments and the Doherty house. That part of that environmental document looked in detail at drainage and how, even though we didn't have the specific house design, it would have looked at the infrastructure and the drainage of creating the two residential lots. Tiffany, am I?
That's right. Yes, it was part of the map review and the public improvement review as well. So that has been closely looked at by our city engineering team, and Gina and Jeff, and then very most recently, Josh was working with James on very fine detail improvements in the last couple of weeks as well.
Right, and Heather was right. My point was, do these plans affect that? So clearly they don't. So that's my first question. And then secondly, perhaps again for the city engineer, there was the driveway access off branching way is is also called out. Obviously, the city's reviewed it. Petaluma Fire Department has also reviewed it. I just wanted to hear from you that the city's confident that this driveway access is okay.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with that design. I think it's been done responsibly, and the applicants responded to any staff comments.
Excellent, thank you. And then my final question, if I may, perhaps back to the landscape architect, as the liaison to the Tree Advisory Committee, I just wanted to call back to what Councilmember Fisher had asked originally about the live oak being replaced by another live oak, and it sounded like towards the end of your comments there is some leeway, perhaps, that it may not have to be a 1-for-1, and I just wanted to make sure I had my facts straight so that I can then report back to the Tree Advisory Committee, because having studied this report, there's a lot of trees that are going to be retained here, and I just wanted to confirm what you had previously said about replacing one live oak for another, or do you have some leeway?
That's a good question. I might defer to your planning department to kind of give us an idea of what the mitigation rate is. Is that something you can explain, Tiffany?
Yes. So it was just the one small oak that's lost before this house, and 3 oaks are proposed for placement. We could do 2. My recommendation would be to site that oak further down the hill along that same side, perhaps reverse it with the olive that's next down the hill. But if you prefer to not have the oak placed at all.
I guess the point of my question was not only to be able to address it tree for tree, but also to help answer one of the public comment concerns about the live oak. I honestly don't have a preference, but I guess I just want to make sure that we come to something that could hopefully satisfy everybody. Right. So that was my angle. Thank you.
Right. I think pushing it down the hill seems like the best solution for all parties in my mind. There are different alternatives available with that issue.
Excellent. Thank you.
And I might add, we can do that, though there are existing oaks down there. And, if we are trying to avoid fire, we really want to avoid kind of plugging more oaks in amongst other oaks, because it's doing that exact thing that we don't want it to, by kind of condensing the trees. Canopies would intermingle, and it could make a worse scenario later on. I'm going to say this one more time. It's probably a while before they get huge, or get big enough to really be a problem. But given the history of Sonoma County's fires in the last few years, all bets are off for anything, right? So we do have to be very precautious about all of this. But that being said, we could, if you were willing, we could upsize a tree as opposed to having 2 or 3, and just put a bigger tree in a better spot. Maybe that would be a good way to go.
Okay.
Yes, that's an option as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Ryder, was your hand up?
Yes, it was. Actually, Commissioner Marzo's question about stormwater reminded me of one other thing. On the hydrology report that was provided, albeit it's almost a year old, there was a note that the outfall system was designed only to convey the 10-year storm event, and that a 100-year storm event in that trench drain would become inundated and spill over into the sidewalk and street gutter. And I just wanted to clarify, I understand that based on the civil engineer's comments that we wouldn't be exceeding preconditioned peak flow, but can perhaps we speak to that overflow scenario of the sidewalk and street gutter?
Yeah, so that's because the through curb drains that go from the trench drain acts as a manifold, and there's several through curb drains that come from that trench drain and go under the sidewalk. It's really geared towards the cross-sectional area of that trench drain is a limiting factor. I think we have maybe, I can't remember, but I think 8 or 10 through curb drains coming from that trench drain through the curb into the gutter of 6th Street. And the hydraulic capacity of those through curb drains is very limited. So we set it up so that if that 10-year flow is exceeded, that the trench drain would bubble up, would act as a bubble up, and that water would go over the sidewalk into the gutter of 6th Street.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you. So I would opt for a larger tree rather than the number of trees. So we can, so even though it'll be 25 years before that gets to a height, the next person that owns that house will curse us. So the house above, and when that view gets interrupted. So I would suggest that we keep all the trees on that side that we plant for this project down to a level that then won't interrupt those above. And a question of staff, the next item on our agenda, you said that we could add a condition that require that the project comply with all standards as adopted by the city council prior to the issue of a building permit, specifically in regard to all electric. Can we do the same with this project?
We can, and it will depend on, I was going to bring that up, that depending on the action that is ultimately taken by the council, when they adopt the all electric and the timing of this actually coming to building permit, all electric may be a requirement. It depends on if, you know, as sometimes when the council adopts new legislation, there is some effective applicability based on projects in pipeline or projects approved or whatever it be. If the council were to adopt all electric, basically after the 30 days, it's effective, and anything that has not been issued a building permit would need to require it. It may require that this one be all electric before it's actually constructed.
So that would mean in both cases, we wouldn't need that condition.
Right. I think the council will make their decision when they consider that all electric legislation on the applicability, and then any project that falls within that would be subject to it.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
And I would say that I think in terms of the tree, I think that we could probably suggest a modification or an addition, maybe adding a D to condition 4 that would, prior to issuance of building permit, that a revised landscape plan be submitted that includes removal of the specific oak. And Tiffany, help me with how you might want. I don't know if there's a tree number to assign to it, but
we could call it the uphill oak be eliminated, replaced with an olive. I suspect is that accurate, Dawn?
And then any
the
mitigation.
Other two, yeah, the other two be either each upsized to 36 or 1 to 24, 1 to 48, whatever fits best with the plan to equal the total. Mm-hmm.
To meet the needed mitigation. So I think that would be a relatively easy addition to condition number 4.
Yes. Dawn, can you confirm if an olive should go where the uphill oak is now proposed, or nothing?
It would fall in line with the other olives we have there.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
I want to address one thing, if I may. This goes back to the neighbor's concern about tree heights. And I think he's the one that brought up the size of the oak. Very observant, I must say. we have looked at this very closely. We've looked at the approximate elevation of his deck, and at the top of that hill is a 6-foot fence. So that fence is actually going to screen a lot of the house view from them because the house is that much lower. When we drop these olives on, say, the 80-foot contour, by the time these olives get to be 25 feet, they will just be kind of right at the ridge of the rooftop. So, and that's a good 10 years away. And I know that doesn't really mean much because someone will pay if it gets too tall. But this type of olive, it's a fruitless olive. Cal Poly states that it gets anywhere between 20 and 30 feet tall. So there's a little bit of leeway. One reason I chose it, and this is just as an out, is they can be readily pruned and they can be kept almost at any height you want to keep them. And I think this is actually proven if you go to the Central Valley and see how they prune olives there. They look like Italian cypress in the Central Valley where they're harvesting for fruit. So they can be pruned. They take to pruning very well, and they can be kept to a certain size if need be. But that particular decision is down the road, of course. So anyways, I just wanted to assure you that it's my opinion that they're well placed for screening, and they will provide a good visual break between both properties or all properties.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question for the city attorney. During public comment, the neighbor's attorney spoke and referenced, and this was referenced also in the letter they sent just a few hours ago, but about the action by the Planning Commission and the City Council in 2019 regarding the PUD, and that the 2019 PUD isn't filed. But isn't that because there's litigation?
No, I don't think it's because there's litigation, and the litigation it's not enjoined from being filed. So I think it has more to do with the rest of the development activity, changing the building plans, et cetera. But that's a surmise on my part, but it can be filed. And as I mentioned, the SPARK condition, planning SPARK condition number 3 requires it to be filed for any approval from the commission to take effect. But the litigation does not prohibit the record. It may ultimately affect the litigation ruling, and this is addressed in at the end of the action items in the resolution. The court's ruling could affect the validity ultimately, and we've provided basically a self-canceling provision at the end of the action part of the resolution in case that occurs, so it doesn't need to come back. We've tried to anticipate the future as best as we can, but it's still possible there might be further commission or council action depending on the outcome of that litigation. But as I mentioned, that doesn't give us the luxury of simply ceasing to process the project, notwithstanding what the Tom Rose's attorneys has mentioned. And I'll just further say in response to his comments, he's made no comments that caused me to change or modify mine to the commission earlier tonight. And hopefully that answers your question, Vice Chair, but if it doesn't, I'll do my best to try again.
Okay. Heather, did you want to, look like you wanted to weigh in there?
How did you read that on my face? Well, I am not sure. So I believe that some of and Tiffany is probably the one most intimately knowledgeable about the specifics of the litigation in terms of, I believe part of the litigation was about setbacks that changed with the most recent PUD approval. Is that correct, Tiffany?
Yes.
And so although the PUD is approved, the final map for the tentative parcel map that was approved to be consistent with the PUD has not been recorded, subject to finalizing or resolving or whatever happens with the litigation. So they're approved, but they haven't been, the map associated with it hasn't been recorded.
Which means they haven't taken effect.
Right.
But again,
but they're approved and they're, yeah.
On my reading, the current status of the litigation doesn't prevent them, but the ruling of the court, which we don't yet have, may impact them and could prevent them from being recorded in their current form. We don't know.
Okay.
But if that happens, and if it happens as it's anticipated in the resolution that it might, that would automatically vacate SPAR approval.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. And if no one else has any other questions or comments, I think we'll entertain a motion if we're ready. If somebody wants to do that. Commissioner Marzo.
I apologize. Yes, I will entertain a motion and to approve site plan and architectural review for the Doherty residence at 21 Branching Way. Do I need to add any more language, Heather?
So my recommendation in response to the dialogue that has occurred would be with a modification to condition 4 to specify that the landscape plan shall eliminate the uphill oak, replace it with an olive tree, and meet required tree mitigation with upsizing the other 2 replacement oaks to comply with applicable IZO requirements.
There's no way I remembered all of that.
You got it.
You can probably say, and that's just language that's, kind of memorializing what was talked about, ensuring that that larger oak is replaced with an olive and that the 2 replacements are larger to ensure that we're meeting all the mitigation requirements for the oaks that are removed.
Richard,
And
if
I would agree with that in that language. I'm sorry, Eric.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Richard. I was just going to say, if you wanted, you could say, including the staff recommendation.
Including the staff recommendations.
Thank you. That sweeps in Heather's recommendation. Thanks, Heather. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Commissioner Marzo. Is there a second? Okay, I'll second the motion. So the motion is made and seconded. Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Bauer, absent. Alonso,
Yes.
Hooper,
Yes.
Marzo,
Yes.
Potter,
Yes.
Potter.
She's recused.
Oh, of course. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Ryder,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Evelyn. The motion passes unanimously 5-0, and the SPAR resolution has been passed. So we will move on. Thank you very much for attending, and the applicants, thank you for staying with us and presenting, and for staff for your hard work on this this project. And with that, let's just take a brief 5-minute recess before we come back for another packed agenda item. So we'll come back at 8:55.
Thank you, folks.
All right, we'll wait for folks to come back. And I see 3, 4, 5, and we're almost ready here. Okay, we will resume the Planning Commission meeting for Petaluma, March 23rd, 2021. It's 8:56. And the last item on our agenda for new business is item 7C, which is the Riverview Apartments project. This is an initial study and mitigated negative declaration and site plan and architectural review. And we'll hear from staff first and then the applicant.
Okay, good evening, commissioners. I'm going to start off with a brief overview of this project and then hand it to Olivia to discuss the environmental document in particular. So the item before you this evening is the Riverview Apartments project. Just as a quick overview, I'm going to touch on the role of the Planning Commission in reviewing this project this evening, touch on the project location and context, project description, brief summary of the staff analysis, and then Olivia will discuss the environmental review, summarize public comment reach, and finish up with the recommendation. So noting specifically the role of the Planning Commission in reviewing this project tonight, this project is a site plan and architectural review entitlement. So the Planning Commission's discretion is really focused and limited to the SPAR findings as outlined in the IZO Chapter 24. There are no legislative actions requested as part of this project. There's no zone change or general plan amendment. The project has been designed consistent with the existing land use designation and the zoning. So no changes are being proposed there. There are no maps requesting approvals or approvals requested by the applicant. This is an apartment project, not an owner's project. So really focused on that site plan and architectural review when reviewing this project. There is associated discretion for the Planning Commission to approve the mitigated negative declaration. And this is true. We've talked before about McCorkle limiting the city's ability to do full CEQA analysis when a project is solely a design review or site plan and architectural review. Because this project will require subsequent regulatory permits, they did agree to the city acting as a lead agency to do the full CEQA review. So that is also before you tonight, and Olivia will go into that in more detail. So touching a little bit on this site, its location, its existing, the existing regulations govern this project. As you can see here, the project site is designated as residential high density. So this is one of our highest density designations within the city. This is 18 to 30 units per acre. And it's also interesting to look at this general plan map to really see the different land uses in this area. So you have the mixed use areas, business park, a little bit of a neighborhood commercial area here, and then parks and open space around it. And similarly with zoning, so it's got an R5 land zoning designation. You have a PCD in this area, and some C1 and some mixed use. So you've got a variety of general plan designations as well as zoning in the immediate vicinity of this site. It's also important to point out that it is a housing opportunity site that was identified in our certified housing element and anticipated to yield 250 units as part of what we showed in our housing element, and identifying the contamination as an obstacle that would need to be sorted out when this project developed. This also to look at the subject property in terms of this leg here was previously, I believe it's a little over 5 acres. This was previously part of this property. And this area, this leg was dedicated to state lands to help preserve the habitat and the area in the floodplain and the wetlands in perpetuity when it was dedicated to state land. So this was part of this property and has since been broken off, dedicated and accepted by state lands. Also looking at the surrounding land uses in this area, you have lots of open space. You have the Petaluma River down here, Almond Marsh, Schoenberger, Rocky Dog Park, as well as you've got residential in here. This is the area that the landscaping business, I'm blanking on the name of that business, but it came before this commission a couple years ago, Petaluma Poultry in this area. So you have a range of uses. Also, just to point out, and Olivia will also touch on this a little bit, this subject property has previously been used as an industrial site. It was the Royal Tallow plant, which has since been demolished, and was also the Rocky Memorial Dog Park was the landfill. So you've had some disturbance to the property and previous use of the property. I thought it important to also point out the relationship with our city's trail network as included in our general plan. This shows solid lines being existing and the dotted line being those proposed connections that we want to see, and want to point out that this project does propose to implement the Class 1 along the frontage here and implement the recreational trail connection in this area. So moving on to the project description, this is a multifamily residential project, 264 units, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom, and sized ranging from 900 to about 1,300 square feet. All of the buildings that these units are in are 3-story massing, and it's divided into 27 buildings, and they're grouped into 7-unit buildings, 10-unit buildings, and 12-unit buildings. On-site parking, I did want to point out a clarification in the staff report. In terms of the required parking for this project, there's a reference in the staff report to 1 parking space per bedroom, or an average of 1.5 parking spaces per unit. And the code actually says whichever is greater. So the greater is the 514 spaces. So this project is proposing on-site parking that meets the minimum requirement of 514 spaces for the 264 apartments. The parking spaces are both an attached garage that are attached to the units, detached garages on the site, as well as surface parking. And this graphic really shows the distribution of those buildings at the various size, with the red color being the 12-unit buildings, the yellow being the 10-unit, and the green being the 7-unit, and how they're laid out on the site. And then corresponding to the massing, the architectural design of each of these buildings, and touching on the materials, the muted color palette, and use of stucco, lap siding, metal roofing for that design. So I also wanted to touch a little bit on the recreation and open space that are proposed with this. Obviously, as you saw in some of those other graphics, this parcel is in close proximity to really a wealth of open space opportunities, trails to the river, Schollenberger, Almond Marsh, and with that leg of the parcel previously dedicated to state lands and those trail connections that I touched on. Also, just kind of to put it into perspective of the overall plan, with the riverfront project, there was easements that go along the river, ultimately will go under the freeway and connect at the marina, and then picking up trails there. So ultimately, in the future, once all these pieces start coming together, this is an area that theoretically you could walk on trails into our downtown core. In terms of recreation and private open space within the project, the units have private balconies and patios. There's shared recreational amenities such as the recreation building, which has a fitness center, a community kitchen, community gathering spaces, a pool area. There's children play areas and barbecue areas throughout the site, as shown here, with the red being barbecue areas, the yellow being children play area. And then this is also showing the path that then runs along that end and connects in, or the class 1 path that runs along the frontage of the project. So the staff report went into quite a bit of detail on standards of review and analysis of the project. I wanted to touch on a couple that I think of particular, note or interest for the commission. In terms of inclusionary housing, this project was deemed complete prior to January 1st, 2019, and therefore when the City Council adopted the current inclusionary housing ordinance, which requires on-site inclusionary housing, it was approved by the council with a limitation on applicability to, in effect, grandfather projects that have been deemed complete or had MAP approvals prior to that beginning of 2019. So this project is grandfathered under that. Additionally, when the inclusionary housing blue fee was increased, also in 2018, that resolution included language that anything deemed complete prior to the beginning of 2019 would pay in lieu fees that were in place at that time. So that would apply to this project. Their option to meet the inclusionary housing requirements is under the ability to pay the in lieu fees. There's a lot of discussion in our recent meetings and in community dialogue about development in the floodplain. This does involve development in the floodplain. It does meet all the requirements of Chapter 6 of the IZO in terms of the criteria for development in the floodplain. And then finally, I also wanted to touch on, you do have a revised red line resolution that we provided, and one of the primary changes in that resolution is the applicant has voluntarily committed to an all-electric project and has also committed to Evergreen through Sonoma Clean Power. So those are added, a revised condition number 14 and a new condition 15 to capture that. The other changes that are noted in red line are some clarifications and clarifications in terms of let's see, the affordable housing in reference to that payment of the in lieu fees in place when the inclusionary housing was adopted, as well as some clarifications with some of the public works conditions around the private versus public utilities. So that concludes my presentation. I'd like to turn it over to Olivia, and so she can discuss in more detail the environmental document and some of those associated topics.
Okay, unmuted now. Great, thank you, Heather. I am going to do a high-level summary of the environmental. I do want to start by just reiterating what Heather said about the city's discretion being limited to site plan and architectural review. The California Environmental Quality Act and the corresponding legislation does not expand the city's authority beyond that which is afforded through the entitlement. So in this case, that is the SPAR provision, and so the discretion is really limited to SPAR. But that being said, there are approvals that are required from state regulatory agencies. Those are discretionary actions by those state agencies. The Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Regional Water Quality Control Board uses their discretion in issuing those permits, and they require an environmental review document in order to do that. And so recognizing this, the applicant agreed to the city completing a full initial study evaluating all environmental categories, and the applicant has also committed to implementing all of the mitigation measures set forth therein. Okay. Building on what Heather said regarding the past uses, the site was formerly occupied by Royal Tallow operations and overlaps with a portion of the former Casa Grande landfill. It is highly disturbed by these past industrial uses and does require remediation due to contamination. A clean closure plan has been developed to guide that cleanup process and involves a health and safety plan to protect workers, removal of a windrow of eucalyptus trees along the western property line to facilitate remediation of soils and impacted wetlands, disposal of impacted materials at a licensed facility, and then post cleanup soil testing to verify that the environmental screening levels have been satisfied for residential use. And this green area here shows the limits of the contamination where that work would occur. And I just want to point out that that overlaps with this large wetland in that area. The biological resources chapter characterizes the site conditions, including the past disturbance, the seasonal wetlands along the western, southern, and eastern portion of the site, as well as non-sensitive communities which occupy a majority of the site. It also does identify that the surrounding area consists of the Petaluma marshlands, which does support a variety of sensitive communities and a number of common species and sensitive special status species as well. The biological chapter does identify a number of mitigation measures to provide for pre-construction surveys, exclusion fencing, protection for wetlands to be preserved, as well as wetlands to be replaced off-site. And I do want to point out that this portion of the property has been dedicated to state lands, and that does include a large swath of seasonal wetlands and these tidal marsh, and again, those will now be preserved and protected in perpetuity. So this shows the on-site removal of wetlands. In the pink hashed is those that will be removed, and the blue hash are those that will be retained. In total, 1.52 acres of seasonal wetlands will be filled, and 0.63 acres, including remediated wetlands, will be preserved, and those are located along the site margins. So the applicant is proposing to offset fill to wetland by creating 3.5 acres of mitigation wetlands off-site, which exceeds the 2-to-1 ratio required by the agencies. The off-site location is about 2 miles away from the project site, and it is at the former Adobe Creek Golf Course. This is considered a pretty ideal situation for off-site mitigation because it restores habitat, it's adjacent to Adobe Creek, so there's some connectivity there, and it is within the same watershed as the wetlands that will be removed. Additionally, wetland preservation and the wetland creation will occur pursuant to a habitat mitigation and monitoring plan, which is subject to review and approval by the regulatory agencies. And I do want to mention that the city has been consulting very closely with the regulatory agencies throughout the environmental review process. A site visit was conducted with representatives from state and federal agencies. We walked the project site as well as the off-site wetland creation area at Adobe Golf Course. The agencies provided a number of input regarding jurisdictional features, biological results of the biological studies and reports, and input on the off-site wetland creation as well. Additionally, the mitigation measures related to biological and hydrological resources were developed in close consultation with the regulatory agencies. So there has been a lot of ongoing coordination and communication with them, and the CEQA document, once it was published, there were not any additional comments or concerns raised by those agencies. One of the items that came out of the consultation process was with the Department of Fish and Wildlife was the development of a supplemental planting plan to replace the removal of the windrow of eucalyptus along the western property line with a native planting palette. And so that is what you are seeing here. And I also want to mention that through tribal consultation with the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria, there was a request to use the black oak species as part of the planting palette. And you can see here in the tree legend that that request has been taken to heart, and 32 black oaks are proposed. As Heather mentioned, this site does overlap with the Deer floodplain. The city's implementing zoning ordinance does allow for development in the floodplain, provided that specific development standards are met, such as elevating the site and flood proofing. The project does satisfy and exceed these requirements, and I understand that the applicant team will be providing some additional information on the floodplain as part of their presentation. So to talk through some of the outreach that has happened to date, the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee did review and weigh in on this project. They provided input on connectivity and some specific recommendations regarding lighting and placement of bike racks. Those have been added as conditions of approval. The applicant has satisfied the city's requirement for the neighborhood meeting, and we've fully complied with all of the public noticing requirements with publication in the Argus Courier, direct mailing to property owners within 1,000 feet of the site, as well as installation of the on-site signage in advance of the meeting, and then full compliance with all of the CEQA noticing and posting provisions, including publication with the state clearinghouse. We have received 2 public comments. One was generally in favor as it supports city housing goals, and had a couple of other comments regarding the site plan and parking. And then one was received in opposition due to concerns with wildlife, and those were both received after publication of the packet, but have been posted to the agenda this evening. So with that, it is recommended that the Planning Commission take the following actions and approve attachment A, which is the resolution adopting the mitigated neg deck and the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, as well as approve attachment B as revised in red line, which is approving the site plan and architectural review. That completes staff's presentation. And I understand the applicant team does have a presentation if the commission would like to receive that at this time.
Thank you, staff, for the thorough presentation, given the complexities involved here. But yes, we will hear from the applicant. They'll have 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for public comment after that.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Richard Coombs, and I'm the managing member of Baywood LLC, which is the owner of the property. We bring before you tonight a project that I believe, once built, will be one of the best places to live in an apartment setting in Petaluma. The access for the residents to your robust trail system, especially along the Petaluma River, along with the dog park, and a village-like setting of having 27 smaller buildings with no more than 12 units in any one building, I think will make this a very special place to live for future Petaluma residents. The project we presented to you tonight is an extremely complex one. You can see that from the presentation by staff. The amount of work and time that's gone into this is enormous. What that meant for us, it was a very time-consuming process. We were deemed complete in 2018, and it was a very expensive process to answer all of the questions that were raised not only by your staff, but by all the various federal agencies and state agencies that are involved in the various aspects of approving this much-needed residential project. Once approved, this project will provide 264 rental unit housing units that will help the city meet its state housing goals. The site is actually a reuse of a piece of property that has had a long history of heavy industrial use. I think that's very important to understand. This was a very degraded site over a number of years, has been filled multiple times over the years. And that used all the way back to 1940, when Royal Tallow was using it as a portion of the site for an original rendering, an animal rendering plant. And the city was using the western portion of the property to burn garbage on an area adjacent to the city landfill, which has now been reused as Rocky Memorial Dog Park. Staff's already addressed, but it's important to understand, originally our property was 20 acres. The original plan was to wait until after approvals to transfer title to what we called the boot, the 5.9 acres that goes all the way down the river. We looked at various ways to utilize that property, and in the end, working with the state agencies, we believed it was most prudent to transfer it in 2017 to resolve that issue, to make sure everyone understood that this very pristine piece of property would be permanently protected. The history and conversion of the property from heavy industrial use to multifamily residential use is important because sadly, Royal Tallow had a leaking underground tank at its plant. And the fact that newspapers in the 1940s equally, sadly, had lead in their ink, which is something I didn't know before I started this project. The Royal Tallow tank had had a full closure with Regional Water Quality Control Board for industrial use. However, when the city modified its general plan and changed this to residential, we had to reopen the site and remediate to a higher level. That has taken years and it's been completed. Even sadder during that process was some testing that was done, which discovered some lead contamination in a thin lens, about an inch thick, that was 18 inches below the ground along the western portion of our property, consistent with the portion that was previously used by the city. Sadly, this resulted in litigation in order to activate the city's insurance companies. That has successfully been resolved and settled, and we will be remediating that part to any construction occurring on the residential. What I hope you find impressive about the project tonight is not just the enormous amount of information that has been prepared or the number of studies that have been prepared, but we hope will impress you is what isn't here. I know it impresses me. Tonight, our knowledge, we have one neighbor concern and possibly one other generic concern. But what's really amazing to me is we have no comments from either federal or state agencies. Now, I have to tell you, in November of 2018, I didn't love the idea, Olivia's going to smile, when Olivia proposed that the city take lead and that we do a detailed CEQA analysis prior to coming to Spark. We could have come to Spark and had open issues that would then be resolved subsequently under CEQA. But as I sit here tonight and see no comments from federal and state agencies, I have to admit publicly that her advice was correct. Yesterday in a Zoom meeting with Olivia and Heather, they once again raised the issue of going all electric. Their advice was consistent with that of Brittany Bendix, who had consistently advised us to do that for well over the 2+ years that she was our project planner. And I do want to acknowledge her efforts tonight on our project. We're sad she can't be here with us. I don't like agreeing to conditions that are not in the code. I happen to believe, and I have attorneys that believe, that conditions that say you have to agree to conditions in the future would not have held, but I didn't want to argue. I really talked to my partners and we discussed the fact that staff was advising us and that staff had been right before, and that maybe we should take the leap of faith and go with their advice again. And so we've agreed to do the all electric, and we've agreed to go further and utilize evergreen power to hopefully make this project more sustainable. I hope this commission consider this a substantial voluntary action on our part. And I hope that these steps, along with all the other commitments we've made in the hundreds of conditions, which have been so diligently prepared by your entire staff, will allow the commission to approve this project with a change. And I think it's amazing. We only have conditions that we ask you to address, and they're related. Condition 5 and 26, we're proposing a nighttime gate for nighttime security only. We propose it be subject to a provision that remain open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. Our project essentially does not have eyes on. When you were looking at that aerial, you notice that 3 sides of our project, we have no adjoining residential that helps provide additional security most residential areas have. We're very concerned that for the benefit of our residents, it would be nice for them to know that people that have no business being there at night will not be allowed to be let in. I have a long list of consultants here tonight to answer any specific questions or concerns after the public hearing comments. However, I am asking Dave Smith, the West Consultants, our hydrologist, to now address the issue of potential impacts on neighboring property of filling a portion of the floodplain, including the sea rise conditions. So with that, I thank you for your time and ask that Dave take over. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. This is Dave Smith with West Consultants. I wanted to start with a clarification to the FEMA flood zone adjacent to the site. It's labeled on the firm as Zone AE Elevation 10. This is a 100-year still water elevation that's based on frequency analysis of tides, which is different than the 100-year water surface elevation due to frequency analysis of rainfall in the watershed. The 100-year rainfall to runoff modeling is set to correspond with the mean high or high tide. And after the modeling is completed, the 100-year still water is then overlaid and compared with the water surface, which could be higher or lower. In the case of the Petaluma River, though, the still water elevation is higher. And so that higher value is what shows up on the FEMA maps. The 100-year still water elevation was calculated by the Corps of Engineers as part of the flood wall project in the Payran neighborhood. And it's actually 9.2 feet. FEMA always rounds up to the nearest foot. So yeah, the existing water surface at the site from the XP storm model, which accounts for the 100-year rainfall in the watershed, is actually a lot lower. It's 7.38 feet. And so that's the 100-year rainfall elevation corresponding with high tide, just to clarify. So 9.2 is the 100-year still water elevation, and it's important to understand that the two are distinct and independent. So he's highlighting on the screen the 9.2. That is not what it looks like with the site. That's it for the existing terrain underneath. That's kind of where it maps. But let me back up and go ahead and describe what analysis we did. The XP storm model used in developing the firm calculates the water surface of 7.38 feet at the property, which is less than the lowest pre-development elevation of 7.75 feet. Therefore, the existing elevations at the site are higher than the calculated water surface elevations at the site, and there would be zero hydraulic impact to neighboring properties. And then to understand the magnitude of the possible 100-year water surface elevation due to sea level rise, we referenced the Our Coast, Our Future website to get the magnitude of rise from the year 2020 to the year 2100. And that approximate rise is 3.7 feet. And so to estimate the increased water surface at the Riverview site, we modified the model to correspond to the build-out conditions to use the downstream boundary condition that's 3.7 feet higher. And the resulting water surface is about 10.18 feet, both for the existing condition and with the project. It's just slightly higher with the project, 0.005 feet. But really the entire site is not getting wet. Therefore, there's no real measurable impact to the adjacent properties due to the development.
Dave, I'm going to have to interrupt just politely and just say we've gone over the 10 minutes for the applicant, but the commission will ask lots of questions on this topic, and we appreciate the thoroughness of all of that. But given the time, we're going to let public comment open for this item, and then we'll bring it back to the commission for further, I'm sure, a robust discussion here. So with that, Mr. Roberts, if you could open public comment, please.
Thank you, Chair Alonso. I'm going to go ahead and share my 3-minute timer. Our attendees tonight, I see we have one who has raised their hand already, but if we have any attendees who would like to speak, simply select the raise hand option at the bottom of your window, and I'll call on you in the order in which you've raised your hand. So up first is Ali Gaylord. I'll allow you to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself, and I'll ask that you please state your name for the record.
Good evening, commissioners. This is Ali Gaylord. I'm calling to speak in favor of the Riverview Apartments project. I think this will be a great place for people to live. I think this is in line with Petaluma's RENA goals by providing 250 plus units of housing. And I did want to say that I did submit a comment letter regarding some of the architectural features that I was hoping that the applicant would address. Sorry, I have some dogs barking. That I was hoping the applicant would address, as well as some parking considerations that I was hoping to be taken into account, and the consideration of all electric rather than using gas at the building. But I just wanted to reiterate my support. If the commission could consider some of these other comments, I would be very pleased to give my full support to this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. I don't see any more hands raised this time, so maybe just a couple moments in case anyone else wants to raise their hand. And I'm not seeing any new hands, so I'll go ahead and pass it back to Chair Alonso.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Roberts. Public comment is now closed on the item, and looks like we have a comment from staff. Planning Manager Hines.
I just wanted to mention two things. One, for Allie's benefit, in case she missed it, during the presentation, agreed to all electric project. So that has been incorporated. And then also the clarification on the parking ratio, and that the 514 is actually the required parking consistent with our implementing zoning ordinance. So those two clarifications that I think directly respond to Allie's written comment. And then there was another aspect of this project that I just wanted to bring to the Planning Commission's attention. You may remember a few months ago that there was a zoning text amendment that you recommended approval to the council, and the council subsequently approved, and that was to allow an extended expiration for housing projects for SPAR, which would allow an applicant to request up to 4 years for a SPAR project instead of the 1 year and 3 1-year extensions. And this was really, it was limited to housing projects, and it was really focused on projects that anticipated a longer lead time before vertical construction began because of things like regulatory permits or more complex public improvements that were needed. So this is a project, and the first project that is before the commission, where the applicant has requested the 4-year extended expiration in line with that updated section of the code. And this is based on the need for regulatory permits and the wetland mitigation efforts that will need to be place. So just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you, Planning Manager Hines. Let's open it up for comments or questions from members of the commission. And we'll start with Councilmember Fisher, and then Commissioner Potter is after her.
Thank you. Couple questions. First of all, the retaining wall, there's apparently almost 1,000 linear feet of retaining wall that I'm not seeing on the site plan. Can we pull that up and show where that is? Apparently on the southern and the eastern perimeter.
Yes, surely so. Let me share my screen here. So at the southerly limits here, at the limits of the roadway, there's a retaining wall, and it at its highest point is 5 feet and tapers down to 3 feet as it returns to the easterly and westerly limits. And if you give me one moment here, I can open a section that depicts that. So these sections H and I, these are the general configuration with the wall adjacent to the property line and a buffer, the road corridor and adjacent improvements. Is there any other clarification I can give you on the proximity of it?
So it was apparently along too the eastern and southern perimeter. Is that the only place that there's retaining wall proposed?
There is also a smaller, it's adjacent to the trail. In order to limit the extent of the grading, the recreational trail has a small feature that you see here in the section. It should be 24 to 36 inches. It's to help limit the footprint so that we can preserve more of the adjacent wetlands, but still keep an alignment for the trail to the easterly point of connection here. But those are the only features. The southerly wall here, maximum of 5 foot, and then the easterly is along the limits of the portions of the recreational trail, 24 to 36 inches.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Potter.
I had a question. I understand that this site has a complex history, and I'm pleased to see that we're reusing sort of a brownfield site to put housing that is much needed and designated in our housing element. The sensitivity of the site relates to its proximity to the wetlands, and I have reviewed the mitigation program, but I didn't see any mention of the residents' ability to keep cats that might interfere with the bird life, and also salt marsh harvest mouse. And I don't know to what extent we can regulate that cats remain indoors, but I wondered maybe if Olivia could address that question.
Yeah, the cats did not come up with discussion with the agencies, so that isn't something that has been specifically added as a component of the mitigation plan at this time. The elevation difference between the adjacent sensitive habitat and the site once constructed really provides for a grade differential, so you're not going to have those two uses abutting. So there's a physical separation there. So those are a couple things that come to mind in addressing those questions, Commissioner Potter.
I did see that there was some perimeter fencing that is proposed, and I didn't know if the nature of that fencing might help with the potential issue.
Yeah, there is a perimeter fencing around the site as well. Cats don't necessarily limit themselves to fences, so I wouldn't necessarily rely on that. But the agencies didn't. The dog park is adjacent. That's an existing condition. There's definitely a concern with sensitive bird populations, for sure. But this is very similar to any kind of, residential use near a sensitive habitat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else have questions before I go? Okay, Commissioner Ryder.
Yes, so thank you. I once again have several. A couple of questions related to water in general. Curious about how high the water table is across the site. Don't remember seeing the specifics of that.
Sure, I can address that. The soil borings that were done as part of the geotechnical report identify groundwater at elevations ranging from 4 feet to 15 feet below the surface.
Terrific, thank you. And I've been told that the retaining wall is not designed as a flood mitigation measure, but I'm wondering about how it might be protected from, as well as the rest of the site, from any tidal erosion that would occur from adjacencies.
Sure, so I can start, and then I imagine that Sybil will want to add on. So I think what we just heard from Dave Smith with West is that the tidal influence isn't actually going to come up that high at that location. So it certainly is not designed as a flood wall. That is not the intent of the retaining wall. It is a retaining wall to hold back the differential between the graded slope and the upslope and the downslope. So it's designed as a retaining wall. And happy to have Sybil, Nathan, or Steve add on to.
Yeah, I'm happy to. One of the primary drivers for our site was also we're tying in at the very northerly limits of the site. I'll zoom in here. It's shown in green. This is our sewer main that's connecting at this point. And in order to maintain gravity flow, for some of the structures at the southerly limit, that is another reason we have the elevations we've set and the limits of the wall where they are. As Olivia spoke, and Dave can help back me up on it's not intended to be a seawall or future flood mitigation structure. It's just, there's some drivers on site for the elevation gain. Also, the mapped FEMA elevations, with all these finished floors are out of elevated above that. I'm happy to provide some additional context to you, but those are some of the drivers and the intent for the configuration we have proposed.
Yeah, I can just weigh in to say in the lower corner there, the lowest pad elevation is about 12.5, I believe. And our 100-year, 21-year with 2100 water surface is 10.2-ish. So it's well below the pad elevation in that lowest part of the development.
Right.
Oh, I must be mistaken. I read somewhere, and I'll have to look at my notes as to exactly where, that the sea level rise was starting to infiltrate those lower buildings by 2070. Is that not the case?
No, I think that there were some preliminary exhibits that were developed prior to West's more exhaustive review of some of the site conditions, but no, there's no anticipation that sea level rise or those flood considerations will disturb the finished floors or the pads. They're well elevated above the required thresholds. As Dave mentioned, buildings 25 and 27 at the southeast corner are the lowest on site, and they're at 12.5, where per Dave's analysis, 9.2 and 10.18 are some of the critical kind of future elevations for sea level rise and flooding.
Okay. Thank you. Great. My next set of questions relate to design. I'm specifically curious about the rec building, and if someone could speak to why, out of all the buildings on the site, that is the only single-story building, the one that is kind of most dominant to the public. You could speak to that decision.
I think that's probably best answered by the applicant. So,
Matt Taylor, if he has his hand raised, if we could add him.
Yeah, I just added him. He should be in here in just a moment.
Yeah, as the applicant, let me speak to that. I've actually, throughout my career, which is, I'm old, I've not seen two-story rec buildings outside of really urban areas. And so the concept was to have the initial impression be coming in, and I had never even thought about a reason. We would also then have to do, we would have to do elevators in it due to handicap access. And we felt this was a really nice way to introduce the product from a street view.
Okay, thank you. I do have more. My apologies. Let's see. So I was looking at the overall site zone requirements, and it seemed like it was possible to avoid pretty significantly most of the floodplain areas, just in general in terms of design. And I'm wondering if you did any conceptual planning that attempted to avoid that construction, and perhaps why that site design was deemed, or the one that you're proposing is deemed superior overall.
Yes, again, I think there's been some confusion regarding the potential impact of flood, and I think some of that's cleared up tonight. And so, although we were well aware of it and we knew certain things would have to occur, that issue was not primary in terms of the site. One of which has already happened. We're under a 45-foot height limitation under this zone, and so even the one thing you don't want to do in my business is to do 4-story buildings with elevators. That's kind of the worst of the worst. If you're going to go to elevators, go to 5, go to 6. If not, stay at 3 so you can do stairs. And so if you look at the site, I thought the question was like wetlands. This was highly disturbed. I think my consultant wrote that the wetlands that were identified originally by the Army Corps are what I would call incidental. The true wetlands were up on the boot. We don't have native species. The area where we're developing had massive amounts of fill over the year. I mean, starting in the 1940s, and clearly another 1.8 feet of fill occurred since 1940. And so the wetlands that we're creating are over at Adobe Creek are far superior, both in amount as well as to quality, and as well as location to a riparian habitat. We did keep, and again, we went to great lengths on our original site plan to avoid the wetlands that were along the edges. Those were the most coherent wetlands on the interface between the existing, that area is avoided, and then the area on the western. It was stunningly bad news to learn that that's where the contamination was, and we're going to have to take those out anyway. That was not good. So we're at the bottom end of our density. So unless we go up there, there's no way to meet our to avoid the floodplain and still meet the minimum requirement for density and what was identified in the general plan for the need for that amount of housing.
Sure, and I'm super thrilled to see how many houses are there. Was there any consideration to building smaller units in any capacity?
Smaller than 12 per building?
No, I'm sorry, smaller individual home sizes to allow for more density in the same square footage. We've done some analysis, and again, we believe over time the design of our, and I wasn't necessarily getting into this, but the design of garage under, as the world evolves, does create potential for conversion. We're going to do these same projects, this same design up in Windsor, and in Windsor we're going to put in 2 micro units in some of the garages, and so we don't see that right now based on our location and the parking needs and everything else, but we like this mix. When we looked at the overall market, we did overall market studies, we visited projects, we've really kind of done our due diligence. We feel this is the greatest need. I guess we could have done fewer 3s, but we really
we really see there's not a lot of ability at 3-bedroom, and as housing prices increase for young families, yeah, we decided, and we met with a bunch of developers. Most of them said, "Why are you doing 3s?" And I said, I think it's a change of trend. The housing price is just getting too high for young families. So that's kind of how we ended up where we were, or where we are.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Just a couple more questions. In particular, switching gears here again, your landscape architecture calcs show that your annual irrigation needs will be close to 2 million gallons. And I'm just wondering if that's expected to be potable water, or if you're looking at other alternative water solutions.
Well, the only one we really know of is potable water in this location. That's actually 20 gallons per apartment per day, which is very low and below the state standards. So we were very pleased with that. We're very well aware of the need to preserve potable water. We happen to own and built Rooster Run Golf Course, where we use all wastewater, as well as Adobe Creek, before it closed, uses all wastewater. So that level of water usage is pretty low. In your city, I haven't seen that sort of focus that I see in some other jurisdictions. I know like Petaluma Golf and Country Club uses potable water and at a very high amount of water usage. It's probably somewhere, I'm running it based on our numbers, it's probably 25 to 40 million gallons per year. And so we've taken it down with low water usage plants. That's actually a really low number. I just checked some rentals that we've done lately that have a little more yard and a little more lawn area, and they're up at about more closer to 100 gallons per unit, where you've got a little bit more of a yard, and with some grand units that we're doing. So we feel very proud that we got that number down.
Don't disagree. I was just curious about the source. Thank you.
Yeah, in our other project, we did it well. I'm just worried that, and we'll take a look at it again. Contamination then doesn't work well with plants, and we don't know, but we'll take one more look at that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Couple more. I'm wondering about any considerations that were made related to light pollution along the property line for habitat use. I saw that we have some cutoffs, but not full cutoffs that at the property line in terms of your kind of light emission is actually rather high around that perimeter drive area. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, we did a full light study, and one of the interesting things is it's the combination. That's where our path system is, and so one of the things the path system that the lighting study identified is the need to make sure that you have pretty adequate light in case people are going out for nighttime walks. And so we don't. I wouldn't have necessarily personally thought of light pollution toward the habitat area, because normally we see that with the adjoining residential, but we meet all the code requirements.
Okay, I just encourage you to find as good of products as you can when you make those final determinations.
I promise we will.
Great, thank you. Okay, question about clarifying your charging station infrastructure. It says you're committed to installing 27 EV charging stations, and I'm not clear as to what the level of charging speed that would be. Can you speak to that?
I think you have more knowledge than I do. So staff asked us, and then they said, would we do 27 charging stations? So we're talking about building out the entire charging station. So if you tell me more, then I'll learn.
Well, there's 3 common levels of charging. There's level 1, which is just like a regular plug in your house. There's level 2, which is usually the preferred for residential setting. And level 3 is the super fast charging. It would be used for folks that are in transit or have an urgent need to charge more quickly. So I would assume that there would be level 2 at the very least, but I was curious.
Let's add level 2 to the condition for clarity. Yes.
Thank you. All right. And then you also, the staff report notes that you're intending to do some sort of energy storage as part of your overall system design, and I'm curious about the specifics.
Yeah, that was a confusion. We're intending to do solar on the rooftops, which was the basis of a lot of our design from the very beginning, in order to accomplish common area solar to meet the common area needs of the project. Those will be designed with the capability to go to power storage. Oddly, and again, I think there was another question raised. We're working with a company called Solar Strata over on Adobe on a different portion of that property on a major energy storage project that will be done next to the right in that area next to the substation. But no, we weren't thinking of having power storage as part of the initial project, but just simply make sure the installation would be designed to allow for it in the future.
Excellent. Thank you. Sorry, one other question I realized I missed in my electric vehicle charging stations. In the garages, it's as stated is conduit and conductors to facilitate easy charger installation. And that terminology is not something I'm familiar with at all. And I was hoping you could clarify.
Yeah, we're putting in the full plugs, there, but not the actual charging stations at this time. But those will be done over time as each individual tenant. But we're obligated to put conduit, which is just simply the plastic pipe. But we're talking about going ahead and putting in the actual, during initial construction, the actual plugs themselves in order to facilitate it. So it's a secondary level.
Okay, great. And so those would also be level 2 plugs for electric capacity.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you for clarifying. That is all of my questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryder. I see Councilmember Fisher's hand is up, but does anyone else have a question since Councilmember Fisher's already gone one way through? Or okay, seeing no one else rush to the microphone. Councilmember Fisher, could you go, please?
Thank you. So just to follow up on those questions. So are there, what I just heard you say was there photovoltaics on the roofs of the buildings, but only to feed the common areas. So there's no capacity there to actually supply electricity to the units. Is that true?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we went with Evergreen. So we're handling, we've done this in other projects. We did this in a project, I don't know, 15 years ago. The part we supply, we don't supply power to the individual units. That's done by outside service. Back then it was PG&E, now it would be Sonoma Clean Power. But we have power needs throughout it, area lights, building lights, all those kind of things, and as well as our any of our equipment. So we believe there's more than sufficient capacity to be able to install and place and offset that use. So that was our plan. So we had that plan starting, I don't know, 6-7 years ago.
So when you're committing to Evergreen, you're really committing your future tenants to Evergreen.
Yes.
So you're not paying for that, they are.
Again, we're happy to not do it if you think that's better, but it was suggested that having that would go a long way for increasing the sustainability of the project, and we believe it can be a marketing feature.
Gotcha. Okay. And then I have questions about the grading, the cut and fill on the site.
Sure.
And back to that, the site plan that showed buildings 25 and 27 next to that retaining wall. So how much fill is actually being added in that location? So what is the existing grade and what will be the future grade there?
Sure. I'm going to give that to Nathan.
Yes, sir. I'm just pulling up a few items here to speak over. I'd say the general magnitude of fill varies across the site between 2 feet to 5 feet at the greatest point. Sorry, I'm just trying to think of the best exhibits here. And that's driven by 2 different factors, the sewer and gravity lines, as I discussed a little bit earlier. But at this vicinity of the site, the fill is approximately 5 feet.
Wow.
It does vary, though. I mean, the site elevations generally trend from the northerly limits down across. There are a few existing soil stockpiles that you can disregard here. They'll be process as part of the site grading, but generally elevation increases are minimal at the northerly limits, 18 inches to 24 inches in spots, and there's cuts up here as well, but the lion's share of the fill is in the southerly and easterly limits, generally where I'm depicting here.
Yeah, and just a point of clarification,
I'm sorry.
Most of that fill is already been brought in. So there's large stockpiles on the northern edge, as well as when we tore down, we paid to tear down the very large, ugly concrete building, and so that's also there and going to be recycled on site into base rock that will be used on site.
And then if we can go back to the site plan that shows the floodplain boundaries.
Sure. Sorry, I just had a lot of windows open. Take me a moment to get to the
Nathan,
first one.
you have a great capacity to do this.
Okay.
Yes, he does.
I'm admiring your ability.
So
I don't know how he does it.
Perhaps this is a simplified one, and Dave could help me maybe speak over this, but the pink here is the 9.2 foot elevation that Dave clarified is the FEMA firm data. So that's for the existing elevations. The improved sites, it won't even, as we discussed, there's fill and a retaining wall, so all the sites are elevated beyond this, in the improved condition. But what I'm attempting to depict here is the limits of that 9.2 foot contour. And, Dave in his report discusses some other elevations around 7.3. So these red areas are the areas below 8 foot elevation. So, there's very little encroachment to the finished site. But I'm sorry, I'm rambling here. What can I clarify for you?
So going back to the 9 foot line there, right? Which is a little bit different than what you're showing on the other site plans that we were.
Yeah, right. I'm sorry.
If we look at that as the line of the floodplain, if you were to pull the buildings away from the property line and bring them into that, so that the buildings don't encroach on the floodplain, how do we keep the same density by eliminating some of the roadways and perhaps increasing the height? Right now you're at 40 feet, you're allowed to go to 45 feet. You have to go an additional foot if you're in the floodplain because of our code requirements, but you wouldn't have to do that if you're outside the floodplain, is my understanding. So that would essentially lower the existing buildings by a foot.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry,
and that would also reduce then such need for fill and that retaining wall on that edge as well.
Yeah, I don't think I can speak to the specific alterations.
I can speak to some of them. The circulation plan is also, we spent exceptional amount of time dealing with the overall circulation. One of the things we wanted to accomplish, if you look, is we brought the roads to the outside edges, and that's so that the whole community can enjoy the open space views. And we think that's very important. The area that's being filled has no impact. We're at the bottom end. I mean, if we go back to the area that shows what we donated to the state, if we could show that.
Yeah. Yes, Rich.
I'd rather stay on this, but.
Okay, I'm sorry, leave it here.
Thank
you. We can't stay at 3 stories and then achieve that. If you took out, that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those buildings, it would basically have to be a complete redesign. All of the buildings go 4 stories. They then require elevators. That is a completely different product and design, and quite different than what the neighborhood is and all those kind of things.
Well, I disagree. The neighborhood is really open space with an industrial park next door, and it would also enhance the views from the Rocky Memorial Dog Park, which right now you see, you're showing it screened by landscaping, but you really see this massive building. And if you could concentrate the building even in a 5-story in the center of the site,
we don't meet. We did some original study. We did something Originally, our original concepts included something called a Texas wrap that includes a parking garage and all those kind of things. Those were all turned down as incompatible above the height limit years ago. I mean, we started with some of those concepts and ended up here with more of a community-oriented village was the concept that we were directed toward heading.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we're in a climate emergency now, and we do have a climate framework plan, and we are adamant about building a floodplain. And so I'm trying to figure out how to to modify this project so it's not in the floodplain. Because we're going to need our floodplain in order to mitigate and adapt to our changing climate.
We understand that. It's some of the reasons we agreed to a variety of the proposed conditions. We were really hopeful that the study that was done by Dave Smith really showed that we're not a site, given our location, that in any way impacts any of those effects, even analyzed out into the 100-year time frame. We are not causing a problem.
Not yet.
Okay, well, let's actually hear from Mr. Smith, since
Sure.
he didn't actually get a chance to finish his talk earlier because of some time. So, Mr. Smith, could you maybe weigh in on some of this conversation, please?
Sure. Yeah, I was going to speak up, and I did sort of finish where I was going before, but on this issue that was just brought up by Mrs. Fisher, the issue is with this particular elevation of 9.2, it's an oceanic elevation. And so it's different than typical floodplains where, you know, if you add fill to your floodplain, you're causing an impact to your neighbors, and it's frowned upon, and you know, cities would regulate against that. But in this case, since we were able to show with the modeling that there's zero impact because the 100-year water surface is below the existing site elevation, that 9.2, it's really just a function of, you know, the 100-year tide data. And so it's a totally different analysis. It's basically all the ocean gauges that are analyzed, and their statistical analysis is done to determine what that 100-year still water elevation is. So it's a completely different process than typical floodplain mapping, just to let you know what that is. So I don't know if that helps or not, but there's a point where you can't run away from the ocean, right? And so we did consider the sea level rise scenario, which was a 3.7 foot additional on the tide gauge for the high tide out to year 2100. And with that modeling, with the rainfall in the watershed, it still shows that, you know, we're only at elevation 10.2 or 10.18, I believe it was. So, you know, you could have, you know, the low-lying areas will definitely fill up to that elevation. But I just wanted to clarify that the 9.2 that we're showing on this graphic over and over, that is a tide data feature, not a rainfall to runoff feature. And so you have to look at them a little bit differently.
So I guess, can I follow up then for staff? Then why is that different than what we're being shown on the plans as part of the staff report, is where the floodplain is?
I can jump in. So this is refined modeling that the applicants undertook, you know, after the site plans were done. So Commissioner Ryder mentioned some discussion in the initial study regarding sea level rise. That is kind of readily available, easy to access information. So we do try and, you know, provide that. The applicants took an extra step here and really dug in and did some refined modeling, and what you've heard tonight from Dave Smith is the result of that. So that came after the plans and the environmental document were prepared.
And after the staff report as well?
No, we had that. It was attached to the staff report. We had that as part of the staff report.
Yeah, it's in the attachments.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Potter.
I just was seeking clarification about the current policy in the city for development in the floodplain. And I know that we are seeking to address changes in the future, but this project was deemed complete in 2019. So I understand that this is consistent with the zoning and the general plan for the site, and that there is already fill brought into the site and a substantial amount of remediation going on. And then a portion of the site that is affected by the still water elevations from the highest high tide will be brought up to a level so that the pads and all of the development will be above those levels both now and for 2021. So I just want to clarify that this project, and in accordance with the staff report, is consistent with the city's general plan and zoning and building standards for this site.
I'm not sure if there's a question in there, but yes, and that's, you know, some of the dialogue that we tried to include in both the staff report and the presentation is that our current regulations do not say you cannot build in the floodplain. It says when you build in the floodplain, you need to meet these criteria. Now there is a lot of discussion, and there's been discussion with the climate emergency framework, and you know, that is definitely a conversation we know is going to be key in our general plan update process, and as we're looking at new code updates and that kind of thing. But it is staff's responsibility also to look at projects against what our adopted regulations are. And so when this project was analyzed for consistency with the zoning ordinance, it was determined consistent with the existing regulations.
And then it appeared that all the potentially significant environmental impacts, including the climate ones, there are mitigation measures identified in the mitigated neg deck for which the applicant is bound to comply with. So I appreciate that, and I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we're going to end up with 264 housing units to comply with our housing opportunity site, actually more than the 250 that we had made a commitment for at this infill development site. So I feel like the issue of the floodplain it's always a tricky one when we have existing regulations and a history at the site that comply with the rules that are in place now that seemingly maybe are not completely in keeping with where we might want to be in the future. But I feel like the analysis, I appreciate the detailed site-specific analysis that helps to clarify that this project, if built as designed, would not be affected by sea level rise at 2021.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Potter, and Commissioner Hooper. And then we'll go to Commissioner Marzo and then Commissioner Ryder.
In the response to one of the questions a few moments ago, the applicant had mentioned looking at a possible different model, like a higher structure, and being rejected from that initially. I just want to get clarification from staff what that was. And I also want to get clarification. It seems that the IZO does allow for R5 residential to go above the height limit if it means increasing the density. So I just want to understand if that's true, and if so, why that wouldn't have been applied here.
I don't recall off the top of my head the specifics of the previous proposals or the previous renditions that were explored by Mr. Coombs and his team. I know we did talk about several different options. At one point we looked at modular construction. I do recall there being kind of a more densely, not necessarily units, but just in terms of the type of structure. And there was discussion about compatibility with the area. There was lots of discussion about elevators and the cost of elevators, and the discussion of once you go above a certain height, you have to include the elevator. And then if you have it broken up into multiple buildings to try to keep a certain scale, and I think think Councilwoman Fisher brought up a good point too, that some of those discussions happened many years ago, and there has been a significant change in lots of the the things we're looking at and discussing in terms of that type of design since previous design. So I can't speak specifically, and I don't think it ever came to no, you can't do that. It was an ongoing dialogue and the opportunities and constraints around different developments.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted clarification on that. And then I had one more question to follow this, which was for the analyst who was working on the kind of title analysis. I believe that's Mr. Smith. I understand that at least if I understand it correctly, you're trying to say that in terms of the 100-year high mark, that one, it's a different elevation than we initially see through FEMA maps, and two, that over that projected period of time, the growth is actually less significant than we expect. But does that change from the overall concern of having that actual breathing room that the floodplain provides over time, especially with kind of coastal rise? I understand that it's not as severe as we may be thinking it was going to be with basic FEMA maps and kind of standard analysis, but there's still value in that breathing room for the floodplain, correct?
Yeah, and that was the purpose of doing that sea level rise analysis. FEMA only requires looking at existing tide gauges as the basis of the modeling. They require using that mean high water elevation, and then you run your 100-year rainfall with that. So you're starting with already a high tide, right? And so we went a step beyond that and looked at, well, what would happen if sea level rise occurred? How much higher would that gauge go? And we cranked it up the 3.7 feet to take us out to year 2100. And then ran the model with that, just to make sure that, the site is still, high enough, not getting wet in that case. And that was the case. All of the fill that's proposed, it's only raising things by a fraction of, 0.005 feet, which is a fraction of an inch. So really no measurable impact. You wouldn't even show that water surface. If it's less than 0.005, it wouldn't even show up on a FEMA study. It'd be zero.
But to be fair, in a high floodwater event, wouldn't that still have a cumulative effect on our neighbors? I understand that for that site, it might not register, and I understand that there are retention basins built in the proposal, but there's still a displacement that could still impact the area, though, correct?
Well, no, we're showing that there is no adjacent impact. The water surface doesn't increase because the site is so similar to the existing condition. There's very, very little impact, just the 0.005. It's less than that, less than 0.005. So the answer is, in terms of impact, no, there's not. And then sea level rise, you can go with a bunch of different estimates on that. We kind of grabbed the middle of the road that's illustrated in our memo, an average of 13 different estimates of sea level rise. Instead of going with the low one or the high one, we just picked, let's go with the middle of the bunch. And that's how we came up with the 3.7 feet. But other people can calculate it differently, but we just wanted to do a fair assessment and take a middle ground approach.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Marzo.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Alonso. Mainly, I do want to echo Commissioner Potter's comments. I agree with them, primarily taking into the context of which this project has been reviewed and approved. And the lens we have today is different than the lens we had before. And I don't believe we necessarily should rewrite and change that lens. I think there's obviously the lens today, the RENA numbers satisfied by this construction would be applicable to, not for the affordable housing numbers. So I understand that you know, we just have to take this project in the context that that is being put forth to us. I do believe the applicant has made a lot of effort to accommodate an area and improve an area. We talk about a floodplain, but it's also a very contaminated area. So I ultimately believe that this is going to be an improvement to our riverway. It's going to be an improvement to the connectivity of trails and to the beautification of the river, because a lot of the work is the work that we don't see in the plans, which is cleaning up, you know, decades of misuse, and so that is that improvement to me. The project, as it's been looked at the time that it was looked at, is appropriate, and so I appreciate everyone's hard work, both on staff, the questions from the commissioners, certainly from the applicants, and I do believe this is ultimately going to be an improvement to our river and the adjoining properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Marzo. Commissioner Ryder?
So I had a point of clarification to Councilmember Fisher's comment about the photovoltaics. Current code for residential construction on 3 stories and below does require photovoltaics for all uses of the residential building. So that is something that it sounds like it's not in the current design, and something that should definitely take into consideration in terms of your overall architectural conception. So okay. Unless this doesn't fall under 2019 code, okay. So it sounds like we're also including comments. So I just want to express my gratitude as well. This is a big one, and you guys all worked very hard, and I appreciate your diligence around water in particular, and then coming around to all electric. I think you'll find that that was a good decision, and probably saved you a lot of money in the long run. Good. So especially when you add that solar requirement on, it will also save your tenants money. So there's lots of benefits there. So thank you.
And Chair, I just wanted to kind of tag along with Commissioner Ryder's comment. The way condition 13 is written, it does reference, you know, that although they've only said for common areas that it has to meet the solar requirements for the appropriate CalGreen tier that it will be reviewed under. So if building code requirement is more solar than they have proposed, that will be required as part of the building construction.
Okay. All right, thank you. I have some questions. Can the staff weigh in? The applicant mentioned that the EV number was 27, and the applicant indicated that was the number that staff came up with. I'm just wondering how that number was determined, and why isn't it more?
To be honest with you, I can't answer that because this was a project that Brittany worked on, and then we've kind of taken the pieces, and that was part of the condition. But I don't, to be completely honest with you, I don't know where the 27 specifically came from. Olivia or potentially Rich, maybe you know where that came from. It exceeds the requirements, but I don't know how that was generated. It was a carryover from staff work that had been done on it.
Olivia, you want to try, or you want me to do it?
I honestly am racking my brain. I know we had a lot of discussion about it.
Well, our understanding of the code as it was explained to us was we were required to put 1 in, and we wanted to make a substantial increase above that. Seeing Amy, go back.
Right. Yeah.
I don't need a site plan for this. Yeah. So that's we were looking at various things that we could do. And again, I really need to go back. I mean, some of this work, we bought this property. We've been in contract in this property for almost 3 decades. We bought it 12 years ago. We've been working hard on it for the last 12 years. And so, yeah, things can happen and codes can change, but I don't know exactly, but I was told we needed to do one wood. We were willing to do more, and we agreed to do the 27. They are expensive, and we thought that was a very substantial voluntary increase. That's how it came about. I don't remember exactly how that number.
Thank you for that. And can staff address just the ins and outs of the offsite wetland mitigation efforts and how Adobe Creek is applicable here to have the applicant propose that?
Sure, I can take a pass at that. So the regulatory agencies require compensatory mitigation for fill to wetlands, and that can be done either through purchasing credits at an offsite mitigation bank. I think the Commission's probably familiar with that. When you have a smaller wetland, those credits are often just purchased. You pay a fee, and that secures your half acre or acre at a approved and regulated existing wetland site. The other option is to create wetlands. This is something that is actually preferred by the agencies because it expands wetland resources rather than keeps them to the existing banks. But it is something that requires a lot of oversight, planning, and coordination, and review and approval. And so the agencies at their discretion will review and accept those, the offsite mitigation, and that is all laid out in the habitat mitigation plan. That is a requirement for review by the Army Corps of Engineers as well as the Regional Water Quality Control Board.
If I may add to that, again, in normal process or would have been, there would simply be a condition that says we have to either do an offsite project or buy mitigation bank. We would have come to you, that would be the condition. We'd have no knowledge of where we were going to do that. We were originally in contract on a bank, and when we unfortunately had to close Adobe Creek in 2017, we realized that again, we do watch, and we saw a shifting movement in the city toward various issues, and this was certainly one of them. And we saw that bank purchase was not deemed to be really as effective as creation. And we uniquely have taken an area equal to the size of our entire project. So we're preserving 15 acres in that corner of Adobe Creek Golf Course, which is adjacent to Adobe Creek. And we're placing more than 2-to-1 new wetlands. And these will truly be, this will be a model project. If you really want to have my consultant get in and talk about the beauty of this site, we've gone through 5 or 6 revisions with the agencies in order to preserve the 2 oak trees. And in the middle, various heritage resources have been avoided. We had to bring out what I called cadaver dogs, but I learned those were, now we call them bone dogs, because they're not looking for cadavers, they're looking for old historical midden sites in order to do avoidance. We have gone beyond the extra mile to create what I think is going to be an amazing mitigation site. We're unlucky that we had to close Adobe. We're lucky that we have that land there to be able to do something that's good next to Adobe Creek.
Thank you. And staff, Heather, I'm sorry, do we have to extend past 10:30 or past 11? It's past. Do we need a vote? I always forget.
Question, I can't remember. Eric, do you know off the top of your head? Is it 10th?
I think it's 10:30 for the commission, but I've got the rules right here. If you give me a second. Sorry, I don't have that memorized. Oh no, it's 11.
It's 11. Okay.
You know, we can't start new matters after 10:30, but to continue past 11 takes a motion.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
confirming that. I just have a few general comments. I haven't heard any of my colleagues mention yet, but I would not be in favor of keeping the private gate. I think we should adopt a condition of approval to remove it. I'm not aware of any large apartment complex in the entire city that has a private gate. I don't think it is appropriate in this instance. So I don't know how I feel about that, but I would be open to not allowing that to occur. I do appreciate the call out under the construction to notify 1,000-foot radius. I think that's a really positive step given the diversity of neighbors near the site. So thank you for agreeing to that. And also the 100-foot line on the northern part of the project site to limit the construction hours. So I just appreciate that sensitivity to that, especially with Azure right there. I just have a general comment under the public safety analysis under the MMD. I did want to just point out that, unfortunately right now in Petaluma, our ambulance response times with the fire department and other paramedics actually isn't meeting standards, national standards. In fact, the recent city council meeting under Measure U in a staff report and staff presentation noted that our response times are not doing well. So I just want to make sure that's noted for future MMD reports that we accurately measure that, especially given how many people would be living here at this project site. So I'm generally in support of the project. I will be supporting it tonight. I'm not thrilled that there's no affordable housing, but granted that this was deemed complete before the inclusionary housing ordinance took effect. I think we have to respect that, like some of my other colleagues have pointed out. So does anyone else have any other final comments, or Commissioner Hooper?
Oh, I think both Amy and Linda were ahead of me.
Okay. Commissioner Ryder.
Thanks, Vice Chair. I just actually wanted to clarify, you had a question about the parking and electric vehicles, and I happen to be a code nerd. So it's a 15% requirement based on total parking capacity for electric vehicles. So they far surpass that and should be complimented for doing so. And also a point of clarification on planning managed lines, the solar requirement is actually an energy code that is base code required across the state of California.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryder, and welcome to the commission. So thank you for that analysis. Councilmember Fisher.
I was going to say, it's great to have a new expert on this commission. I love it.
It's so great. Thank you.
Vice Chair Alonso brought up what we thought about the gate, and I agree with staff that we should not allow a private gate here. And I do want to compliment the applicant for listening to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee. I was on that committee when you came before us and requested all the things that we did, and you certainly accommodated all of those requests, and so I'm really pleased to see those. As anxious as I am about climate change and building in our floodplain, if I'm assured that this is not a floodplain, then I'll go ahead and support the project.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Fisher. Commissioner Hooper?
I also agree with my colleagues that I would not want to see the private gate there either. I think it's a bad precedent in the town. And I want to thank the applicant for putting so much work into this project and taking so much time. There's the housing that this would provide, we desperately need. I appreciate the analysis provided for the floodplain because that was also of great concern to me as well. One thing I did want to note, because I noticed an overall concern regarding questions about kind of the code we have to adhere to or the code that we wish we had, etc. Yes, it's our job to adhere to the code that we're required to follow, and it's our job to make sure that we're not making decisions solely based on our values. But when it comes to kind of responding to these projects, we also need to be clear with the public, and it's helpful to actually ask questions that clarify the reasons why. I only say this because I think sometimes there's a concern that these questions come out of a desire to do this for some kind of personal reason, and when in reality most people don't know what it is we have to work off of. They don't know why we can't just say, well, that's a floodplain, we shouldn't build there. A lot of us know we should not build there now, but that code doesn't exist. It still baffles me that there's a minimum parking requirement that we have to follow. And as much as that's infuriating, I would rather the public know why that's infuriating and know what we're working under than think that, oh, wow, they just think that this much parking is still a good idea in 2021. And that's not a comment on the applicant. Again, I'm grateful for the work and the time that you put in, both in terms of kind of rehabilitating the land, but also making a project that follows our existing codes. But I just wanted to put that comment out there for anyone who might be concerned that there's, I guess, too much critique or too much concern out of left field, when in reality, the public should really know what the constraints are and also what we're trying to work towards. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments, or should we entertain a motion? Or does staff want to make any final comments before we?
Well, if you're getting close to a motion, there's a few things that came out of the conversation that I would suggest we memorialize in the conditions. Condition number 7, specifying that at a minimum 27 level 2 EV charging stations. And then condition 8, that an installation of conduit and level 2 plugs instead of conductors for the EV charging. And then it sounds like condition 13, instead of referencing solar, rooftop solar to meet at least the minimum Cal Green requirements, it sounds like it should be the minimum building code requirements. So, and then the additional modifications that were in the revised, the red line of the SPAR. So those would be additional clarifications that I would suggest based on the discussion that the commission just had.
And we could add the condition of approval to not have the private gate.
That's already in here.
Oh, it is. Okay.
That's
I
already
did
in
that
there
too.
as a condition 5. I think there's 2 of them, 5 and yes, it's already there for sure. I think it might even be in there twice.
It is.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Heather. Any motions? Please.
I'll move approval of a resolution adopting a mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting program for the Riverview Apartment project.
I'll second.
And Commissioner Marzo seconds. There'll be 2 separate votes because there's 2 separate resolutions. So we'll do a roll call on the MMD as made by Commissioner Potter.
Okay, Bauer, absent. Alonso,
Yes.
Hooper,
Yes.
Marzo,
Yes.
Potter,
Aye.
Ryder,
Yes.
Fisher.
Yes.
Thank you, Evelyn. Motion carries 6-0 to adopt that resolution. And is there a second motion? This bar.
I will propose that we approve a resolution approving the site plan and architecture review for the Riverview Apartment project as amended by the staff presentation in this meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. And then any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll go to a vote.
Okay, Bauer, absent. Alonso,
Yes.
Hooper,
Yes.
Marzo,
Yes.
Potter,
Aye.
Ryder,
Yes.
Fisher.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. And the motion has been agreed to 6-0 for the SPAR resolution. So both motions have been adopted for item 7C And since that concludes all of our new business, I just want to thank the applicant for a thorough presentation and all the staff's work on this important project. So thank you, everyone. And we are adjourned at 10:39.
Thank you all for staying late, and particularly thanks to staff. And I don't want to forget Brittany. She really worked her heart out on this project. So I want to remember her. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you all.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.